He's not illegal.
No, I'm saying it's someone who's not an American citizen.
Oh my God.
But tell me, where is anyone ever to point out the conditions set upon all the time on all of the Bill of Rights from left and right? It's literally everybody just arguing one thing. Might makes right. That's all they're arguing.
I don't believe that's what they're arguing. I appreciate the passion.
Did Donald Trump... You brought up Gen 6. Did the Republicans have a committee for May 29th? Did they go and set a national commission to go and hunt down...
Why did Trump say it was no big deal then?
What, May 29th?
Yeah, why is it no big deal?
He's got an ego problem.
Okay, so he lied. Did Trump lie, yes or no?
Donald Trump has been in office and he is flooding the zone. Basically, everybody agrees. On the left and the right, the strategy appears to be do as much as you can, as fast as you can to overwhelm activists, opposition, and the courts. So there are a lot of things that the Trump administration has done so far for which he has drawn the ire of liberals, Democrats, and the left. And we are going to debate these issues largely from a legal context. And to kick it off, I think one of the biggest stories we've seen in the past couple of weeks has been the deportation or the revocation of visas from students, from activists, protesters, and people with actual legal status in this country. Notably, Trump revoked the legal status of 530,000 immigrants who actually came here legally under a program started by Joe Biden. So we'll talk about that and a whole lot more. We got a couple gentlemen joining us to engage in this debate. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Pisco. I'm an attorney. I do streams on YouTube. Pisco's Hour.
Well, right on.
Yeah.
And what's your view? You love Trump.
No, I hate Trump. I think that Trump is doing an awful thing to the Constitution. But in this case specifically, I think that there are a lot of conservatives that care about the First Amendment, or at least purport to care about the First Amendment. And there's on-point precedent from the Supreme Court that resident aliens get First Amendment rights. So why is Donald Trump doing the bidding of Israel and attacking the First Amendment rights of, for example, a green card holder who did nothing more than just indicate their view as to the situation in Palestine? It's completely unjustifiable.
Right on, sir. You want to grab that mic and pull it up?
Yeah, sure. Joe Newman, aka Good Logic. I host a YouTube channel and Rumble channel called Good Logic. I'm a New York litigator who turned podcaster after COVID. I'm a massive free speech advocate, so much so that I actually sued Judge Merchan for his unconstitutional gag order of President Trump in pro se, in my own name, because I felt that the violation of his First Amendment right to speak was harming my First Amendment right to cover it as a member of the press. And I took that all the way up and applying to the Supreme Court. But on this particular issue, it's about Mahmoud Khalil. This is not a First Amendment issue. Sometimes a free speech issue is a First Amendment issue. Often it is, but this is not a situation like that. I look forward to getting into it with you.
Right on. Well, everybody, make sure to smash the like button. Share the show if you do want to hear this debate, or if you think people should hear this debate. It'll get particularly interesting. Not just the immigration issue, but of course, there's a whole bunch of other issues, as you already brought up, with the courts and how it affects Trump in this country. But let's just kick it off, man. Tell us what you think. Let me give a little bit of context. So Mahmoud Khalil, he was one of the organizers of the protests we saw in Colombia. He had I believe it was a 2-year conditional green card, which got revoked by the State Department. He is currently pending deportation, but he's not the only one. I think there may be 4 others. These are individuals who are here on legal status with legal visas, who are now having their visas revoked and facing deportation. The Trump administration says that Mahmoud was engaged in activities aligned with Hamas, and that was a national security threat. So there's a lot more to the story, but why don't you tell us?
Yeah, let's first start with what it's not about. It's not about criminal activity. It's not about alleged crimes. I think both of you can agree that we have to take the allegations of the government. We can't invent new rationales for why Mahmoud Khalil is deportable. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't want to hear anything from people in the comments saying he occupied, he helped occupy, or that he's giving material support to Hamas. If the government does not allege that he's giving material support to Hamas, why should we at all assume that he is and invent new rationales for deporting him? And obviously there's no evidence that he's in connection with Hamas or giving any material support to them. So I think that the first point is some agreement that we only discuss the allegations and the actual basis of removability for Mahmoud Khalil.
I want to be clear before we begin this, so we frame our discussion in a healthy way. Whether we're talking about this from a legal perspective or from a moral perspective or philosophical American culture type of perspective, we can attack this as attorneys and talk about whether or not what's happening here and who's in the right and who's in the wrong. Or we can attack this as far as from a moral and philosophical perspective. And I want to make sure that we're both on the same page, that we don't jump back and forth. That I'll make a point about the law and you'll say philosophically that's wrong. Or I'll make a point about philosophically and you'll come back to the law. So can we pick one? And because I'm sure that Khalil loses on any of those, any way you look at it, philosophically, legally, or as far as American constitutional perspective, like what's a healthy philosophy of our Constitution, he loses every way. So you pick the direction you want to go, and let's go there.
So to be clear, you're not willing to concede the legal argument here.
Which legal argument are you?
This is the First Amendment argument. You're not going to concede it.
That this is a First Amendment argument.
You're not going to concede that Trump is violating the First Amendment by
not even close.
Okay,
no.
so let's deal with that first, because I think you would agree that if you thought that the First Amendment was being violated by Trump, you would have to condemn him, wouldn't you?
I would.
Yeah, because the First Amendment's important to you. You just said that you went through all
I went all the way to the Supreme Court.
So let's start there, and I think that would get into some, perhaps some philosophical territory. I'm not willing to shy away from that. I think it's also, a good idea, morally, practically, to have the First Amendment. But let's stick with the First Amendment. Okay. And so I guess my first question for you is: do you think Mahmoud Khalil, a legal permanent resident, let's take the strongest case, do they have First Amendment rights? Yes or no?
Quick caveat: he wasn't a permanent resident. He had a conditional 2-year green card.
Sure, but do you want to assume for the purpose of hypothetical that he is a permanent resident?
No, I would.
What is a conditional 2-year green card? Can somebody tell me what that means? You don't know. Quiet down, little bro.
I'm not assuming anything, because you're saying he's acting unconstitutionally to change the nature of as far as what the actual set of facts are.
He has a conditional green card, which basically means you have to reapply after 2 years to get like the 10-year green card visa. But for all intents and purposes, he is an LPR, and he has the government has cleared him to stay in this country. He just needs to go through a couple extra procedures to make sure that it's not a sham marriage, that kind of thing.
Are you willing to concede the fact that he obtained that green card through deceitful and illegal means?
No, I'm not. Not at all. That's a pretext. But why don't we stick to the initial issue, which is, does he even have First Amendment rights?
Oh, so I'd say is the First Amendment rights that he enjoys, like any illegal alien, do exist and are not nearly the same level as the rights an American citizen has.
So to be clear, I want to see what you think. You agree that LPRs, lawful permanent residents, even though it's conditional status, I understand that, have First Amendment rights. That is correct, right?
I don't know. I agree that the Supreme Court has said that there is some level of First Amendment rights. But ask yourself this: why? Why do they have any First Amendment rights? Why do we give them civil liberties?
Oh my God. Do you see the movement? Like, he can't just answer the question. Do they have, he's like, well, according to the Supreme Court, they have First Amendment rights. Sure. So you don't agree then? They don't. That's a weasel, by the way, but.
Why has the Supreme Court granted them those liberties, which were created for the protection of American citizens? So why is, and for the benefit of American, right? Because you recognize our government was created by, for, and of the people.
It says we the people.
And the people are citizens, correct?
No, that's not true. The Constitution is clear where it wants to refer to persons and people and where it refers to citizens. For example, in the 14th Amendment, there's a privileges or immunities clause. It speaks about the privileges or immunities of citizens. When it's talking about the
Also, I know he would say he was just not being eloquent in his speech, but it's really funny because I know for a fact that Good Logic would be one of those guys who's like, our rights are, the government only exists to protect our rights. We don't get rights from the government. The government only exists to protect the rights that we already have. The rights come from our creator, okay? I like how Good Logic is like, the government is literally the thing that gives us our rights, and the government doesn't give any rights to illegal, that's just whatever.
Requirements for who's the president or for who is a senator, it says citizen. When it says, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, or for example, the right of the people to be free from, in their papers, persons and effects from.
Oh yeah, also notice how he did exactly what he was saying he didn't want to do at the very beginning, which is when he jumped immediately from the law right to the philosophy of like, well, why do these things even exist? Right, that's funny, yeah.
Reasonable searches and seizures. That's referring to persons. And there was a concept of personhood that was broader than citizenship from the attorneys who founded this country and made the Constitution. They were smart people.
So I just want to add, I actually agree. We've had this come up many times on our show. The 4th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So what we've highlighted often is that it draws a distinction between persons and citizens, specifically identifying initially all persons born, later on the clarification of what makes someone a citizen. So there's two distinct definitions here. The reason this has come up is actually the pro-life, pro-choice abortion debate in the question of whether or not an unborn child is a person. Interestingly, and I don't mean to be hyperpartisan on this one, but when it comes to the liberal faction, they actually disagree with my assessment on this, arguing that no, it's referring to citizens, and if you're not born, you're not a citizen, because when you get to the question of is the unborn a person, this clearly would protect the life of that person who is not yet a citizen, not yet born.
Yeah, I think that's a cop-out. I think that the courts ultimately will have to determine as a legal matter what is a person, what does that mean for purposes of constitutionality. Now, it could be that the originalist interpretation of person as understood at the time that the Constitution was framed only involved born alive persons. That's not an inconsistent position. Or it could be the case that the people who founded this country would have considered a person to be someone who is in utero. So I don't pretend to know the actual legal analysis here, but I'm glad, Tim, that you agree that even the First Amendment, let's take a look at the First Amendment, doesn't refer to persons or citizens. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
Respecting an establishment, I think.
If we could just look for a moment, at what Tim just read with respect to the 14th Amendment, and the language there is important, and you read it quickly, and I understand why. But there's a distinction there as far as between citizens and persons in that 14th Amendment. And what is promised to persons, those who are not citizens? What's promised them is life, liberty, and due process, not the civil rights in general. So to say that applies, it actually is implicitly against your position. It's actually going to the point that citizens specifically are the ones.
Like, just think about this for a moment. First of all, there's no shot there's any Supreme Court case that would back up this insane and unhinged position. But you're telling me that lawful permanent residents have absolutely no freedom of speech? So like a cop could hear an LPR say, fuck you, and the cop could arrest them, and then they could get convicted of a crime because they have no First Amendment rights? Like, do we have a whole separate body of law just for lawful permanent residents? Like, this is just on its face such an outlandish and absurd statement. Like, what are you talking about?
Ones who have crafted for them our civil liberties, and the only protections that America is willing to afford to those people who are not citizens of this country is life, liberty, and due process.
Well, clearly the Supreme Court disagrees with you. You acknowledge the Supreme Court disagrees with you.
What I'm saying is,
do you acknowledge that, yes or no?
I agree that with we
yes
talk about the Wixon case that you're thinking of recognizes that there are some civil liberties that are afforded to people
including
who are not
in that
citizens.
Case specifically the First Amendment. Is that right?
So, yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're wrong. Yes, the 48 Supreme Court case that we looked at yesterday. He's just
the First Amendment. There's procedural due process cases that aliens have access to. I'm using the term alien here because that's the term used in the
because it's the proper term. It's the proper term. That's why.
I don't think it's a nice thing.
Your audience is not offended. Don't worry.
But listen, I want to be accurate here. It says that aliens have access to, for example, you can't just throw them out of the country summarily. There are procedural due process issues, even for
the APA
illegally. Well, not even absence of the Administrative Procedures Act. There's a constitutional notion of procedural due process that has purchase on persons, and
as said in the 14th Amendment, and they're entitled to due process.
And in the Fifth Amendment against the federal government, which is what is at issue here, what you just said and what you acknowledge is, despite what you might think about why the country was formed, the consistent consistent case law has been that persons in this country have access to a lot of civil liberties. I don't know why we wouldn't extend it to the First Amendment if you acknowledge there's case law on point about it. And specifically when the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
Right, and the Supreme Court has recognized, while they recognize the First Amendment right, they also have equally recognized that the First Amendment right of someone who's visiting this country are not as robust as the protections that American citizens have. Do you admit that?
I'm not so sure. For people already admitted into the country. So there's a difference that I acknowledge that the country makes between exclusion matters and for people who are in the country. The key example of this, by the way, are the Chinese exclusion cases. I'm sure that you guys, maybe your audience is not familiar, but there was a point, the first restricted immigration laws in this country, up until 1870 thereabout, we had open borders policy in this country. Complete open borders, except for the Alien Enemies Act and the Alien Friends Act, which maybe we'll get to.
This is actually pretty interesting because it actually functioned this way well after the 1800s. I went to San Diego and was talking with people on both sides of the border. And it's actually, I think, in the past, I don't know, 50, 60 years, where the border became heavier. And it used to be, even up to like the early 1900s, you could just walk into San Diego back and forth. Only recently, I guess, with national security concerns, communications, and population density, has it become much more rigid.
Yeah, that's totally correct. And the first restrictive immigration laws were against Chinese people. It said, well, the first it was vagrants and stuff, but ultimately it said Chinese people, if you're of Chinese or Asian descent, you can't enter the country. And that case has not been overturned. Right. And you acknowledge that. So I recognize, I hope that you're not.
I'm not sure what your point is as far as that case not being overturned. As if that's still binding law today.
So the point is, I recognize, even though I may disagree, that, and it's interesting, I think that Trump did not argue that it actually was a Muslim ban and seemed to assume that a Muslim ban when he instituted a travel ban would be unconstitutional. So I don't know how viable that precedent is. But in the Chinese exclusion cases, that there is a difference in the law between an exclusion matter and someone who's in the country. So no, I actually don't recognize, and I don't know that to be the case, that individuals in this country, even if they're not permanent residents, don't have First Amendment rights.
Well, you should review Trump v. Hawaii. You should review Reno versus AATC. There have been a myriad of Supreme Court cases which have recognized the fact that those who are visiting this country, not simply when they're abroad, that we're going to give. I don't know what type of free speech limitations you think that they would be. That we're not going to promise free speech to some foreigner who's out in Greenland or well, Greenland soon to be America, but who's out in the UK and say that we recognize that they have a right to speak. That doesn't even mean anything.
So then here's the question:
What free speech? What right to speak? It's that Congress shall pass no laws infringing on a right to speak. And what are we talking about foreigners for? What is he even referring to here? Hello?
If Trump issued an order tomorrow and said, if you're a Jew, your student visa is being revoked.
Right.
Would that be constitutional or not? Yes,
absolutely not.
Why not?
Because the threshold minimum, because, and here's the thing, I've allowed you to engage this conversation in good faith as if this is about First Amendment rights, when this is not at all a First Amendment issue. This is purely an immigration issue. And this is what I was saying with respect to the fact that while I'm a free speech advocate, I don't think that this in any way touches on free speech or in the concept of First Amendment rights.
Just as another reminder, conservatives have no values and no principles. They don't believe in freedom of speech. They don't believe in freedom of expression. They don't care about any of that shit. It's as long as they agree with me. As long as they agree with me, then I protect their rights. Otherwise, fuck you. Don't ever think these people, if you call them that, are anything different than that, okay?
And the reason it doesn't is because when you're talking about immigration law, that is where government powers are at their zenith, as opposed to when you're talking about the First Amendment rights of individuals.
I don't even like the terms he's using. Government power? What part of the government are we talking about here? Like the government in its totality? Because Congress has a lot of ability and leeway to pass legislation related to immigration, sure. I think he meant specifically not to talk about immigration, but to talk about national security issues, and not to talk about the government, but explicitly the executive branch or the president. I think that's what he meant to invoke there, but we're pretty wishy-washy with our terms here, I feel, but
First Amendment rights of someone who's merely visiting this country are at their nadir. So what you're trying to postulate here is that this individual whose rights are lower than yours or mine, whose rights are not as robust with respect to his First Amendment rights, is now challenging the decision-making powers of the President of the United States with respect to state and international affairs and national security, which is where the Constitution carves out the strongest powers and protections and says this is the exclusive domain of the executive branch. That is what you're in conflict here and saying this is unconstitutional.
If it's true for free speech, it's true of the religion clauses. The immigration plenary power framework that you've just laid out would apply just as strongly to religion free speech, which is in the First Amendment, as to the religion clauses that are in the First Amendment.
Here's why he's wrong. If I could just correct that. Now, the reason you're mistaken about that is because the Supreme Court, in its insight, has pointed out that the threshold that you have to meet on an immigration issue is that it has to be facially legitimate and bona fide. Facially legitimate and bona fide. So if you talk about some law that the president will throw out there saying, I don't want any more black people coming into this country, or Muslims or Jews or redheaded Irish people, that is not facially legitimate and bona fide, and it wouldn't pass that.
What if he says Muslims are more likely to do terrorist acts?
And who's the one to determine? Careful. Because who determines if it's facially bona fide or whatever? So are you saying that other people do have the ability to look at what the president is saying? Because that sounds like something that would be reviewable then by a court, right?
If he says Muslims, so that's not. If he says that as Muslims, if he says terrorists, that's
he
a
said
problem.
Muslims are more likely to commit terrorist acts, and it's facially legitimate.
To me, that's not facial. I don't see how that would be.
Oh, to me, it's not. Oh, okay. Well, far be it from me. Oh my God.
Because to say that everyone who's a member of this religion, which is being practiced by over 1 billion people, is a terror threat, is not facially legitimate and bona fide.
Why is it facially legitimate to say anyone who advocates in support of, even just assume, I do not take it for granted, I just want to be clear, I don't take it as a fact that Mahmoud Khalil supports Hamas. I don't take that as a fact. Let's assume he does. Okay. Why is it facially legitimate to say that what would be, I think you would agree, free speech for citizens, I think you've agreed that LPRs have First Amendment rights. What's the legitimacy in targeting what otherwise would be clearly protected speech?
Just what was LPR?
Lawful permanent resident.
Green card holder.
Right. So the difference, I would definitely agree that all the actions that we know of that Mahmoud Khalil has taken, if it was taken by an American citizen, that the government would be completely out of bounds and wrong for in any way infringing on that. At the same time,
I got to ask you, does the First Amendment pertain to illegal activities?
No.
Sorry.
Well, it defines the scope of what is and what's not legal sometimes. For example, so the First Amendment, if there were a law that said it's illegal to talk to your neighbor, it's illegal to hand out pamphlets in support of Donald Trump, even though there's a law that says it's illegal to do criminality, the Constitution supersedes. And so to the extent that there's an application of law, for example, in the INA that purports to make something illegal, or it would have no purchase if it conflicted with First Amendment precedent.
Did Mahmoud Khalil occupy any buildings illegally?
There's no allegations to that effect, and so why should we consider it? There's no allegation of that. In fact, there's reporting that says that he purposely did not attend any of these sit-ins for the reason of he's worried about the status of his green card.
I could be wrong, but there were conversations and videos, I believe, that showed Mahmoud Khalil inside buildings that had been under quote-unquote student occupation.
At the time they were occupied, or any time?
At the time they were occupied.
Okay, listen.
I could be wrong, though.
I read reporting that said that effectively that he was keeping away from those areas, but
for accusations and for court, this is why it's so important to have like a formal process. One might even say due process to evaluate these things, is because media reports and who knows what's true or what's not true, whatever. If it's in front of a judge, though, right? These are formal documents that are submitted that both sides have a right to and the ability to look through and determine, the factuality of them, or to fight against the factuality of them if they want. But this is the issue of not having any kind of due process. Was he there? Was he not? I don't know. Who knows? The government didn't make the charge. There's no court process. There's no due process. We have no idea. We have no way to even arbitrate that that disagreement.
Even if it were true, don't you agree that Trump, if he wants to do that, he should charge him with, or he should get someone to charge him with a crime? Because in this country, there's a line between admissibility basis of removal and deportable basis of removal. And in order to be deportable on the basis of something like, for example, occupying a building, I assume he would need a conviction under that.
No. I'll tell you right now, it would be much worse if Trump had charged him with a crime. If his DOJ went out and charged him with a crime, I would be much more bothered by the action, because that would now be because that would be punishing him for his free speech. The Supreme Court has said definitively that deportation and removal is not considered a punishment. I urge you to check. I'll give you the citations. 525 U.S. 471. The case is Reno versus Anti-American Discrimination Committee or Commission. That case spells out very clearly. You cannot pretend, first and foremost, that it is considered criminal punishment, and also that he's held.
I agree that immigration is not a criminal punishment.
So that's
I totally agree that that's the precedent of the court.
So then ask yourself this: how is it a First Amendment violation at all?
First Amendment does not just arise under criminal actions. For example, if the government said that you can't get a liquor license if you're a Jew, or you can't get a liquor license if you support Trump, I think that you would agree that's not a criminal action, but the First Amendment still has purchase. And yes or no?
And that again is
that
not
a yes?
bona fide.
Wait, is that yes?
You're trying to catch me on a gotcha.
He won't even answer questions. I hate God. It's so bad faith. Just answer. You won't even answer a question. Just answer that question, and then go on to the rest of your answer. He won't even answer it because he's
action, but the First Amendment still has purchase. And yes or no?
And that again is that not bona fide.
Wait, is that yes?
You're trying to catch me on a gotcha.
What I'm saying, you just said it was only for criminal matters, and I just want to be clear to the audience: is it only for criminal matters?
What I'm saying is that with respect to someone who's an illegal alien, we are talking about whether or not it's bona fide, it's facially
not an illegal
bona fide
alien
and legitimate.
He's not an illegal
alien. I'm saying it's someone who's not an American citizen.
Oh my God! What a slip of the tongue! Oh my God! An illegal alien. I didn't mean illegal. I just meant anyone who's not like an actual citizen. Oh, okay. So it's all the same in your head? What an unbelievable.
Let me ask you guys for clarification, because the Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 221, subsection I, says after the issuance of a visa or other documentation to any alien, the consular officer or the Secretary of State may at any time, in his discretion, revoke such visa or other documentation. There's more to that. There's exceptions. I don't know that I need to read the whole thing. I think you're both familiar with this. So how does this pertain to Mahmoud?
Yeah. So there's wide deference in this country for the Secretary of State, for the Attorney General, for the Department of Homeland Security, for the President himself to make all kinds of decisions that would prejudice his right to be in this country. I don't deny that there's the case law is that there's no substantive right for non-citizens to be in this country. That Congress tomorrow could pass a law that says everyone who's not a citizen needs to leave. You don't have a substantive right to be here. But here's the question. Can you do it for illegitimate purpose that's reprehensible under the Constitution? Using the statute, not saying that the statute itself is unconstitutional facially, but as applied, could you say, for example, in my discretion, because you are a Jew, I am taking away your visa? So the answer is no, right? Well, would you agree?
So far, what I've gotten from what you're saying is that
I'm not going to read over this whole case because I don't have the time. But so this fucking guy cited this Reno versus American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee lawsuit. Note the differences. So one, this had to do with 8 resident aliens who were members of the PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which was a terrorist group. I think this might have been one of the organizations that was flying planes into buildings. I think the PFLP was. I think the DFLP is another one. This is what Bad Bunny was wearing I think the headband of. I think it was for the PFLP. This is a terrorist group, okay? And these were 8 resident aliens who were members of that group, okay? And their deportation was ordered. Even though none of the 8 had been accused of committing a criminal act, in response, they filed suit. So they did have the ability, at least initially, to file a lawsuit challenging this, saying that federal officials had targeted them because of their political opinions and political affiliation, a violation of freedoms protected by the First Amendment. But Congress then enacted the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, which eliminated judicial review of the Justice Department's deportation proceedings against several classes of aliens. There are so many other facts that are different here than just the President of the United States has unilaterally decided that he's going to deport some dude with absolutely no review whatsoever and no ability for them to challenge anything. Like, whatever.
It sounds like the reason the Trump administration has not accused him of a crime pertaining to those protests and has simply cited national security concerns is to avoid a hearing based on the arguments you're making.
Yeah, that's reprehensible, isn't it?
Well,
No,
I mean,
that's not what happens.
but the issue is,
If it's true, would it be reprehensible to we're really doing this for the crime, but we're kind of sneaking it in? Wouldn't that be?
I don't know that they're actually doing it for the crime. I'm
If they
saying,
did it.
if Donald Trump said we don't want people who are not citizens to try and influence our government.
No. If it was a pretext, right? So if it were true that he wants to punish Mahmoud Khalil for actual criminal acts, but he's just trying to do it faster through this other method.
Well, there's
wouldn't
a
that
lot
be
in there.
reprehensible?
The word punish, for instance. If I don't want to ascribe anything. What I'm trying to get at is, if Donald Trump were to say we need pretext to remove this man, he's going to find himself in 1A hearings.
Would he find himself an enemy of you, or would you condemn him for coming up with pretext to remove people or to punish people?
But again, just to clarify, because I want to make sure we get the full point before we get into that. The issue appears to be that the Secretary of State has the legal right for any reason in his own discretion at any time to revoke an alien's visa.
Under the law, but as applied, could they violate the Constitution? So I'll ask you, Tim, if he said, in my discretion, I'm going to revoke the visa because he's a Jew, you think that would be illegal?
To revoke someone's visa for...
Pisco is going to know more than me, obviously, on legal shit. But I think the topic that Pisco is centering on has to do with being viewpoint neutral, which makes it not a violation of the First Amendment. So, for instance, I think you could say that the Secretary of State has the right to remove an immigrant for any reason, right? So the Secretary of State could say, hey, I'm revoking your visa because I think you're an asshole. And in that case, I think that the Secretary of State might have the right to do that. But if the Secretary of State said, hey, I'm revoking your visa because you gave a speech about how you wanted to support the Democrats, you wouldn't be allowed to do that because I don't think that's a viewpoint neutral consideration. And if it's not viewpoint neutral, then it's considered a violation of your freedom of speech, I believe is the case.
For being a Jew.
Correct. In the exercise of discretion, would you say, for example, well, it says he can revoke it for any reason. Would you say that's legal?
It's a good question. What I would say is...
You can say I don't know.
I do want to address it real quick because my answer is I don't know, because you have two areas. One where the law literally says for any reason, but then you run into the constitutional argument where that law can't be applied as it goes to the First Amendment.
So Tim, doesn't
I don't know.
But doesn't the threshold the Supreme Court laid out that for some reason you just want to toss it, you want to just disregard completely when you give a crazy example of let's ban all Jews, let's ban all Muslims, let's ban all redheads, is that facially legitimate and bona fide? You seem to keep just walking, like dancing right past that.
I'm not.
That's the
I
essence
acknowledge
here.
that the
Your
Chinese
hypotheticals are a joke because of that. So they don't meet that very tiny threshold.
So I want to be very clear. I started that entire conversation by saying the Chinese exclusion laws are still good law. And even though I don't necessarily agree with them. Wait, you think that Chinese exclusion laws are good law?
What I'm saying is that as of today, you think it's legal today to exclude Chinese?
Immigration lawyers cite that case repeatedly, all the time, with respect to these kind of issues with constitutionality. Che Ching-ping, Fang Wei-ting, these are cases that the Supreme Court is, they constantly are cited there. They have not developed anti-precedent status yet. And I wanted, because you accused me of dancing around that issue. I started that conversation by saying, and recognizing the law, which says that by the law, those cases have not been overturned. What I said was, that's an exclusion decision. That's an exclusion decision. That's different than when you're in the interior of the country.
So I have a question for you guys, and I have two questions. The first one's extremely obvious. If a black man walked into a bakery and they said, we don't serve black people, that is illegal.
That's illegal under the the civil rights framework.
Right.
It's private discrimination, different situation.
Right. So in the instance where the individual walks into the store and the owner says, sir, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody, please leave. Yeah. Well, that's not an issue of racism or a violation of the civil
rights. Oh, Tim, nice. Wow. You just stumbled into that. That's correct. That should be fun.
That's a great example, Tim, and I really appreciate it because that goes to show you the extent to which, the government actually has latitude in all kinds of... They could have done it through another means. They could have said, we're doing it because this bullshit about the lie, which we can get into, on your green card application. They could have found some other means. They could have charged them with a crime with a neutral ground, but they didn't. The reason they said it's because you support Hamas is because they're trying to signal, they're trying to bully private actors, just like they're doing with the universities, just like they're doing with the firms, just like we're doing with all these actors. They're trying to put a signal and say, hey, if you disagree with us on policy on Israel, we're going to make you hurt. And so you're right. If they actually thought he was a security threat, why not go through the other methods of doing so? But they said it specifically, and Rubio's coming out.
So this is about the Jews? That's what it's about?
Listen, you agree. This is about authoritarianism and coercion. Donald Trump doesn't give a fuck about the First Amendment.
Oh my God! You see, this is
he's suing a pollster.
I'm so tired of leftists just coming to these conclusions as far as I can look inside his head and I know better than anyone.
I hate him, dude. I can't do this guy. Just as a quick thing, When Good Logic says his case went to the Supreme Court, I'm just curious if he's lying about this. When he says his case went to the Supreme Court, did it go to the United States federal level Supreme Court, or does he just mean the First Court of Appeals in New York State? Does anybody know? I'm actually curious on that. Also, I'm grabbing water. Hold on 1 second. Oh God. In case you didn't know, we said this a million times, but in New York State, their First Court of Appeals is called the Supreme Court. I don't know why. So I'm curious if does he actually have a case that went to the United States Supreme Court, or is it just like I just want to know. Jesus.
Exactly what Trump is really thinking. Even though I've seen policy after policy that is issued that has had nothing to do whatsoever with reaching the conclusions I've reached, I'm still going to come out here and tell you, I know what he's thinking. He doesn't care about the First Amendment. He doesn't care about due process. He only cares about himself. You can see one piece of evidence after another about this, and you're going to come out there and you're going to say to yourself, oh no, I know better than you. Everyone else. Why? Because I'm sitting here on the outside. Even though I've been tilted and come across him every single way, I'm going to look at any way I possibly can to frame it against him.
There is no other explanation.
Anyway, I'm trying oh my God. So Trump sued a couple of people who did polls he didn't like. So what? Oh my God. So Trump has sued basically every single social media company because they banned him on Facebook. Oh my God. So Donald Trump is writing executive orders targeting lawyers just because they happen to have worked with Mueller in the past. Oh, come on. That's really a First Amendment violation. You really think it's anti-free speech, bro? Okay, so he's trying to sue NBC or whatever because he doesn't like a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala. Okay, well, maybe that wasn't right. Give me a fucking break, dude. Holy shit.
There is no other explanation. If they thought it was because of his criminal conduct, they would say so. If they thought it was, and now they have this bullshit pretext about.
No, what they said was.
Oh, okay. So it did go to the United States Supreme Court at least. All right.
If they thought it was because of his criminal conduct, they would say so. If they thought it was, and now they have this bullshit pretext about.
No, what they said was, let's look at what they did say. What they said was that we consider him a national security issue. What is this proper procedure to do under that issue, under that setting? And the proper procedure is laid out in the APA that I started with, that you wanted to just jump away from. The APA and the steps that they were actually taking was saying we're going to process him through an administrative immigration judge, and he's going to examine this to make sure that we are not just capturing him, throwing a bag over his head, and
like they're doing with the Venezuelans.
Yes,
like they're doing with the Venezuelans.
Yes,
I don't know. Like they're doing with the Venezuelans, not even giving them the opportunity.
Oh my God, he's about to say, I don't know anything about that. He's going to do the thing. He's about to do the thing. Oh, where is that? There's some meme, right, where the guy he's very slowly turning, he's pulling out the. I don't know anything about that, bro. Oh, and you're just absolutely obliterated, dude. Fuck me, man.
File habeas petitions.
What I'm
it's
saying
disgusting. You're defending this regime.
Habeas petitions are not. You're not entitled to a habeas petition the moment you get arrested.
But habeas petition.
That's you're mistaken. Supreme Court does not allow you to just automatically get a habeas petition. You cannot get it under 1252G, I believe. You cannot go to the federal district court until such time as you've exhausted
all the administrative process.
process.
They said we didn't even need to send these people that were throwing bags over their heads, going to the tarmac and trying to get them off the plane before the court opens. They said we don't even need to, in court, by the way, they said we don't even need to tell their lawyers where they're at. We don't even need to give them notice of the basis of their removal.
Well, yes, correct. I love Brian, okay? I love Brian Tyler Cohen, okay? But I'm glad that Pisco's read these. He knows what's happening. Yes, those two things are huge. Because the government said, listen, if you want to challenge this shit in court, go for it. And then the lawyers are saying, okay, the problem is, one, you're literally deporting people without even telling them first, so they don't even know. And two, we don't even know where the fuck they're being held because you won't tell us. How the fuck can you help those people? There's no way to even do anything. Yes.
You're making
the fact that you would defend this criminal regime and say Trump cares about rights. Okay. It's the most preposterous thing I've ever heard.
So let's just come to a conclusion here. So you agree that Mahmoud Kalula, everything's fine. Now you want to move on to the
No. I just
God.
want to be clear because what I'm telling Tim, I think I saw some nodding there from Tim. I want to see if you agree.
You need to develop a strategy for that shit. What's the fallacy name for that? It's unironically what you need to do is you need to pull a Pisco, and Pisco's not pulling a Pisco. He half pulls a Pisco, and then he goes back to pulling a Destiny, where he tries to make him answer a question, but then he goes off and he doesn't force them to answer the question. He needs to be stronger on that. Yes or no? Was this true or false? Yes or no? Agree or disagree? He needs to hold him to a point there, because Good Logic has managed to slippery slide his way like a snake out of every hard answer, basically.
Because you saw
nodding was the Israel stuff.
Well, it seems like that is what he's trying to do. He's trying to signal 100%.
So, but I'll clarify too, because one thing that frustrates me is there are I call them the Jews people, where they think everything's the Jews all the time. I think this is purely related to American foreign policy. I think this country wants to fund its foreign military operations. Israel's a strong ally. The U.S. wants to give them money, wants to be involved, wants military there. I don't think it's the Jews. I think it's a strategic location for U.S. Middle Eastern operations. And you've got these protests that are emerging and influence spreading across universities, which are counter to American foreign policy interests, largely that I disagree with. So I do think Trump is trying to send a message. That's why Romesa, I believe her name was, Ozturk, she had her visa revoked. I believe it was presumably based on a pro-Palestinian paper that was written. Now, that doesn't go to the question of whether or not they have the legal right to do it, but I think the motivation strongly has to do with.
They're posting the Studio Ghibli of them deporting people. They're posting ASMR.
I'll just real quick.
I know that's a little different because it's not the Israel issue.
I just want to say, because we talked about this last night, that's a fentanyl dealer. And
I understand, but the whole purpose is to send signals.
I think Trump is trying to trick the left by doing that into defending one of the most.
Well, I'll defend reprehensible people if it means defending our rights. Right now, yeah, I'll absolutely.
But
to me, that's the point.
You're not defending our rights.
I am defending our rights.
No, it's not our rights.
Yes, it is.
Unless you're here via green card or visa, you're not defending our rights.
What a disgusting, subhuman piece of shit. God, I actually hate him. He's so fucking disgusting. God, oh, it's white people. I'm just kidding. It's not. There's racist brown people too. Fuck, it's so gross. These people aren't like us. They're LPRs, bro.
Defending the rights that America decides to confer on people who are not citizens of her nation.
But you just agreed that Mahmoud Khalil has First Amendment rights. You just said.
I said they are limited First Amendment rights.
What is the First Amendment? What kind of rights would it be that, okay, you have rights, but you can't say what we want you to say, otherwise we'll throw you out of the country?
Let me
that right.
I have an honest question.
I'll answer it. Can I answer his question?
Yeah.
How is that a right? It's a right in that he's not sitting in a prison. And I don't want him. And if
He's sitting in a jail right now.
No, what I'm saying is he's
You fucking, oh my God.
at the detention waiting for processing.
Hold comfort.
What's hold comfort?
Hold comfort for his wife, who is now 8 months pregnant and didn't even know where he was, and obviously has a kid on the way and is trying to get information from the administration on where he is.
I have a question for you guys. The Constitution applies to non-citizens.
Yes.
The Bill of Rights do. Can they buy guns? Honest question. I don't know if they can.
I think the Second Amendment, as interpreted by this court, I don't necessarily agree.
Do it. Do it.
Wait. Whoa. Listen.
Tell me they can buy guns.
That's
right. Load them up.
The Second Amendment is based. Listen, and I don't necessarily agree with the court's interpretation as applied in Heller and in the following case McDonald, but that is the precedent of the Supreme Court. And it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's people. And the same logic that would protect non-citizens with respect to searches and seizures, which would protect them for torture, right? You agree that the government can't inflict cruel and unusual punishment to illegal immigrants. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
You agree with that?
So
do you agree with that, yes or no?
They can't torture illegal.
They can't torture illegal immigrants, right?
I agree with
that. Okay. And
Why? Why? I thought they didn't have any rights.
so you also agree that they can't be subject to unreasonable searches and seizures, right? Fair?
That's due process.
Okay. So why would they not be protected by the Second Amendment?
Yeah. I mean, we've bumped into this one quite a bit because,
Like, Pisco should force an answer there.
I've known for some time that the Constitution applies to all peoples here, and the reason that it does, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is that if the Fourth Amendment didn't, there'd be no Fourth Amendment. They'd be able to say, we just think you're not a citizen, so now we're going to raid your house.
Oh, how is fucking Tim is just by accident bumping into all of the best arguments? Yes. Yeah, that's why, without due process, you literally have no rights whatsoever. If due process isn't afforded to you, then you have no right for anything ever, because who the fuck knows, right? Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So no, you can't raid someone's house.
Oh, and he even agreed with it in the background. You hear a good long time? Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Because
you're not a citizen.
Yeah, because the protection is for an individual, not the interpretation of whether they're here legally or not. And so the question then comes to guns, because Second Amendment says the people. So I'm like, can illegal immigrants buy guns in this country?
So you're saying when it says the people, that's a limitation that carves out. So you're saying because the Second Amendment says, I never really considered Tim's question before. I think it's an interesting question.
And think about the recent precedent.
I need to explain to you where I'm coming from with respect to this, with respect to illegal aliens. Because
yes, and now remember, good logic started this with, let's not mix law and philosophy or morality, okay? Let's be very specific. Now it's like, okay, whoa, fuck the law, okay. Let me just tell you how I personally feel, okay?
I do believe very firmly that our Constitution, when we're first forming our government, our founders have in mind, why do we have a government in the first place? It's in order to help facilitate and secure the safety of our people. But we have this grave concern, and that concern is very obvious based on history, that once you put a government in power, however that government is run, whether it's democracy or something else, then invariably they're going to crush the people. So we're going to set up not a democracy, which we're not at all a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, and that
oh my God, what?
Constitution will safeguard the individual from the powers that this group of individuals has given the government. And the reason we have this government here is to basically keep those citizens safe from outsiders. So we don't have
sounds like a liberal justice. Because
outsiders, we have a republic, not a democracy. Like, if you were to follow this line of rationalization, okay, you're saying the founding fathers gave us a republic and not a democracy. Why are you saying that? Well, obviously to protect the rights of the people. How does a democracy threaten the rights of the people over a republic? Well, I mean, just think about it. Like in a pure democracy, you could vote people's rights away, and some people might not even have rights. And it's like, okay, so the founding fathers created a constitutional republic instead of a democracy so that large groups of people wouldn't be able to take away the rights of small groups of people. And this was at the same time that slavery was legal, right? Do you understand how fucking retarded this argument is? That this is like the most self-defeating, auto-collapsing argument that has ever been made in the history of all of arguments? Like, what? Holy Christ.
There's a general purpose for general welfare.
What I'm saying is,
I'm going to interpret these words however I want.
I'm switching into the constitutional theory, not based on like this case here or that statute there. I'm just analyzing now. I asked in the beginning, let's talk about the law. We explored that for 30 minutes. Now,
oh, yeah, did you?
This point, I'm talking to you as far as constitutional.
We haven't run to ground. We haven't run to ground. I want to know if Tim Pool agrees that this deportation is legitimate, or whether you're going to say you're agnostic about it. I want to know whether you think that this attempted deportation is okay to do or not.
I think it's okay to do.
Why do you think it's okay to do?
I think that this is the next question I was getting into as pertains to the Constitution. The idea that we're going to try and interpret the Constitution, to me, has become largely meaningless outside of the initial 7 articles. The construction of government makes a lot of sense. People often say, they'll say what Trump is doing or what Biden is doing is unconstitutional. They're usually referring to the Bill of Rights, which have never been universally understood ever. For instance...
What?
Blasphemy and obscenity were illegal. Literally after they ratified the Constitution, you walked outside and screamed obscenities, you'd be arrested, literally arrested. George Carlin was arrested in the 70s for swearing. Like, there was no...
There have been bad times in our history where we have not been true to the Constitution.
No, but
John Adams passed the sedition...
Well, wait, hold on. What we have to understand is freedom of speech in the First Amendment doesn't mean that you can't criminalize any type of speech ever. It's more figuring out, like, well, what qualifies as speech, which is a difficult question to answer, honestly, right? So, for instance, obscenity is not considered speech, but then there comes a defining question of, like, well, what is obscenity, right? And every human being can agree that there are some things that probably should be, that probably shouldn't count as things that should be protected, right? So any adult material aimed at children, explicit like porn, for children is obscenity. There is no free speech protection there. There are certain categories of porn, I believe, that are considered obscene, and there is no free speech protections there. There are certain things that we can all also agree probably should never be protected. If I'm outside and I'm saying, like, hey, John, can you go pick up that machete and go hack off Sharon's head? And then John does it, and then you come to arrest me for what? Conspiracy? You mean speech? I can't even talk anymore? What, you're going to ban words, right? Well, that conspiracy crimes are more or less just speech crimes, right? To say that there are certain types of speech that are outlawed, therefore the First Amendment doesn't exist or hasn't been used evenly. Like, there's things that are speech that are protected, and then there are things that we probably don't consider speech. Like, of course, there's going to be a determination here of what qualifies. But this is one of the reasons as well why I get so angry when Americans are like, oh, like, we have freedom of speech and Europe doesn't have freedom of speech. It's like, well, hold on, it's a more complicated question than you're aware of.
Sedition Act, where it literally was a crime to insult the president. All right. So,
and then it got pulled back.
Correct.
So my point is, as it pertains to the Second Amendment, our current understanding is a complete inversion from every different period throughout various generations of different moral worldviews. Notably with DC versus Heller and then McDonald v. Chicago is when we started to get the actual, you can actually have guns. So it was surprising to me to actually learn this in the past few years because I didn't really pay attention to the gun stuff. But I looked at the map of the right to keep and bear arms pre-Heller didn't exist in this country despite a Second Amendment. You could have a dismantled, broken up piece of guns throughout your house, but it was actually legal for a state to deny you a permit to carry, deny you a permit to own, and require you to dismantle it in your own house.
Initially, the Bill of Rights did not apply to the states. The Bill of Rights were a framework to apply to the federal government. And so that's why there's that proviso. It only affected DC. And so for the longest time, there was no incorporation, is the term called, of the Second Amendment. That's why McDonald's is a case that incorporates it through the due process. But I want to push you a little bit there, because it sounds like what you're suggesting is there's nothing Trump could do, because it's all mushy, it's all woozy, it's all wazzy. There have been times where we disrespected, that there's nothing Trump could do where you would say, I don't like that because of the First Amendment. Is that true?
Let me ask you, is it constitutional to...
Wait, what, could you answer that question first? Well, I asked you, you were kind of like saying, the First Amendment, it's all, we never respected it anyway, who cares about it? That's kind of what, okay, but what would it take for Trump to do where you would say, okay, because of the First Amendment, this shit is fucked up and I'm going to call him out for on the First Amendment grounds? Is there anything he could do where you would call him out for First Amendment grounds? So the presupposition there that I have an issue with is First Amendment grounds. I think the real question is moral grounds. I don't care about the Constitution. I care if he's doing something wrong. So
I don't care about the Constitution. If you don't care about, there's something called lame philosophy shit. There's something called the principle of explosion, where in a formalistic sense, what it tries to say is that if you allow a contradiction into some system of logic, then through that contradiction, you can prove any statement to be true. Because through junctions and disjunctions and bullshit. But like logically, it makes sense, right? If you allow a contradiction to exist, well, if something can be contradicted, why couldn't anything be contradicted? There must be some super system that you're referring to if this system has built-in contradictions. If you don't have any kind of consistent rule of law in this case to apply said principles, then I mean, how are you ever applying them? Now, maybe Tim could say, well, I don't care about the Constitution because I have my own personal moral framework. Okay, but a lot of people have their own personal moral framework. Law is how we distinguish between, or law is how we make commensurate everybody's different moral frameworks by boiling it down into some written thing where we say, okay, well, even if we all disagree or agree on some things morally or whatever, we all agree that these are the things that we have to follow or else the government can deprive us of our rights, right?
Even if the Constitution allows him to be evil, I'm going to call him out for being evil, if it's Trump, Biden, or otherwise.
And if the Constitution says something, for example, it says, for example, you don't care about the Constitution.
I do care about the Constitution.
But you only care about the non-rights portions of the Constitution?
Okay, my point was, the Bill of Rights have been applied by those in whatever way they interpret, and then when it gets challenged to the courts reinterpret or interpret in whatever way they
care about the constitutional rights or not?
Absolutely.
So if you care about the constitutional rights, don't you care
as I interpret them.
As you interpret them.
And you interpret them differently.
like when he says things about like, well, courts can interpret and reinterpret and blah, 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 like they kind of can, but they shouldn't. This is where the concept of stare decisis or stare decisis decisis, right? Where stare decisis comes in, where courts aren't really supposed to be in the business of constantly reinterpreting themselves. Gorsuch's opinion that Gorsuch's concurrence and Loper spells out really well. Like, this is what stare decisis is supposed to mean. I don't remember all the qualifications of it, but like rulings made during ordinary times, meaning not like, oh my God, like I'm citing this one court case that happened in the middle of World War II. It's like, okay, that was extraordinary time. So it's like a string of rulings made in ordinary times by sober judges. The more you have, like, these are supposed to guide you. The collective wisdom of judges over long periods of time are supposed to guide you in how you make your future decisions. This is why the overturning of Roe v. Wade was considered kind of a big deal. He's like, wait, hold on. You're tossing a court case that we've kind of built off of for 60 years. Is a little bit bizarre, right? But these concepts are important because the Constitution is not just constantly reinterpreted every day by a new judge. That's not really true. That's not the case.
I interpret them differently. But
For example, is it cruel and unusual punishment to put a male person in a female prison?
for whom?
How did we get back to trans issues already?
Or either.
I think that it could be if you can show, for example,
Could be. We have a problem right now.
I don't know if Pisco even knows what Tim Pool is talking about right now. He's talking about the trans person. I don't know if Pisco's aware. Maybe he is.
So it depends, because you're going to need to do research on these constitutional principles to see, to what extent is it the danger to the person that you're putting in the female prison. As I understand it, there's not an epidemic of abuse from trans people in male female individuals. The more likely situation. Wait. As I understand,
I'm not trying to open that issue for debate. The point of contention was
difficult issue. But
exactly. There's an Eighth Amendment, and we actually don't know how to apply it to certain issues.
Here we have something clear, right? Here we have something clear. You think if an American citizen did what Mahmoud Khalil did, do you think that he should be able to go to jail under the First Amendment?
Absolutely not.
If he was occupying a building, yes.
No,
That's not. He didn't get charged with. Sorry.
That aside, because we have to put that aside, because the government's not alleging that, right? So
yes.
if all that's being alleged is an American
leafleted for Al-Aqsa flood.
Okay, but an American citizen can do that, right?
Indeed.
And if Trump threw an American citizen in jail or said that you can't get liquor license because you did that, something that's perfectly constitutional, would you call him out for First Amendment violations?
Yes.
So the only difference here is whether or not he's a resident alien or whether he's American. That's really the only difference.
Absolutely.
And so you just agreed, didn't you, that resident aliens have First Amendment rights?
No.
And as he pointed out, they're limited, and that's why I asked the question about guns and cruel and unusual punishment.
You agreed in the guns context.
First Amendment is not the guns amendment, but it's okay.
You said, of course it's natural that you have gun rights. And so it seems like you're granted in the guns right. In fact, that's a hot take, and it's one that I respect you for. But why wouldn't you grant it in the First Amendment context?
Like I already mentioned, we could not sit here and define what cruel and unusual punishment is as per the Eighth Amendment. So you're going to assert there are certain. So the argument really just boils down to my moral worldview. That's the issue I take with the Bill of Rights and how we interpret them. As you guys are all citing legal precedent, saying the court said this and the court said that, I'm sitting here being like, the only thing that really matters is whether the majority body politic determines it to be moral or not. So, for instance, when it was a predominantly Christian nation, if you
I would. This gets into like legal philosophy or whatever, which I'm not really qualified to give an opinion on. But I would argue that to some extent, judges protect you from just this like mass fucking popular opinion of what's legal or what's not legal. I would argue that judges should be there to some extent to protect you from that. I would hope. They're not just there to follow the mass body politic or whatever.
Blasphemed, you'd find yourself in jail. If you went in public and started cussing and swearing, you'd find yourself in jail. But as we've shifted away from that moral worldview, you can now go on television and cuss up a storm like South Park did, counting how many times they swore on TV. These things change dramatically. Right now, as a society, we don't know. You've got the conservatives saying, and I use this because it's obviously a hot button issue. A judge just ruled that Trump must return two biological male individuals to a woman's prison. Women there are upset. And liberal activists say putting transgender individuals who are undergoing, who are affirmed HRT in a male prison is cruel and unusual to them. Conservatives argue the inverse. There's not going to be an accepted moral worldview between the two political factions in this country on that issue.
But I just want to take an issue with the premise there, because you said what ultimately is going to be protected by these rights is going to be determined by the body politic. I think that's crucially misunderstanding the purpose of the rights. These rights are meant to apply as to the majority.
I know.
The reason that they're so difficult to get rid of is because it's supposed to be protection against the excesses of a majority. And there's some ANCAPs.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Oh, God. Fuck. I haven't heard anybody with like a thorough understanding, a good argumentation. Yes. Because think about what Tim is saying. If the whole point of the courts was just to go along with what all the people thought, we wouldn't need courts, right? We don't need courts. We would just lynch people, which is what Tim Pool is essentially saying is happening, that judges just make rulings based on what all the people, think already. Well, then we don't need courts at that point. We just lynch people. Like, it's essentially what you're describing, right? Yes.
or anarcho-style people here that I met who are like really nice people, and they understand this, right? And if you're an anarcho-capitalist, you understand this, that there are abuses that the majority of the public can do,
Yes.
and the rights are to stand in contradiction to what general sentiment
Correct.
is, and to say, no, even if Congress wants to, right? Congress shall make no law. So even if Congress would like to violate the First Amendment rights of Mahmoud Khalil, they can't. That's what the First Amendment has to protect. And they
over and over again, they violated every.
Don't we have a
Oh my God, Tim's like.
we have a requirement, just like in the Second Amendment context, and you think the Second Amendment is important. Wasn't it important for the Supreme Court to say, in your view, that
Like a good question would be here, because it would appeal to Tim's mind too, is the concept of moral progress, right? Are the laws that we have today for America better than the laws that we had 250 years ago or whatever, right? Yeah, it's gotten better, right? Have there been violations? Have there been abuses? Have there been excesses? Sure, but in general, ideally, we've worked within the framework of this Constitution to ensure more rights, more protections, everything else for Americans in general over time, right? Would you agree with that?
there is an individual right here associated with gun.
What does infringe mean?
Infringe?
Yeah.
It's going to be different.
The right to keep and bear arms has been infringed every possible way, and we're supposed to sit here and say we have a Second Amendment. We don't. The First Amendment, they've made. How many laws are on the books pertaining to speech, religion, or otherwise? There's a ridiculous amount of them.
But is that just an excuse not to ever think about the First Amendment?
No, it's a moral philosophical point that this country tolerates what violates the Constitution if it applies to the majority, and that's not correct.
There are clear cases and there are unclear cases, right? There's a clear case of Second Amendment violation that says no, every gun ownership, that's a crime. You would say that's a clear case that reasonable minds can't disagree about. Or you're
arguing extremes instead of what we're actually.
No, but what I'm saying, but your framework where you're saying, well, who knows because the Congress is always violated, that's an excuse to never apply the principle, even in clear cases.
Yes.
And here we have a clear case where you acknowledge that the First Amendment, as to citizens, would protect this conduct. And in fact, you would criticize Trump if he went after citizens for doing this conduct. You've also accepted, I think, as a maxim or as a general principle, that resident aliens do have First Amendment rights. Now, so why does that not follow? Why doesn't it?
I mean, I'd like to have.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
Well, let me make one more point on this.
Yeah.
The reason I asked the question about a black man going to a bakery, the baker could say to him, I'm sorry, look, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody. Goodbye. And what can you really do? Often in these circumstances, individuals who feel aggrieved will sue anyway, and they'll often win. Even if it actually isn't.
Whether they win or not, but that's going to depend on like a totality of circumstances. I don't know. I don't think I'm using it. I shouldn't say totality of circumstances. I don't know if I'm using it correctly. But like, I think you can demonstrate discriminatory behavior by bringing in more examples and more circumstances as well, right? Like if you show that like, oh, hey, look, this guy's used the same excuse for every single black customer, then you can try to show that in a court case, right?
Isn't the case that the person was discriminated against based on race. The issue then becomes to be racist, simply just don't admit you are. So what we have here is the INA allows them to deport Mahmoud Khalil. And so I shrug and say, change the law if you have an issue with it. But for the time being, there's nothing else to be done.
So if they said national security threat because he's a Muslim, we're deporting him, would you say the same thing?
That's the point I made about the bakery.
So would you say
No.
that? Why wouldn't you?
So this is the problem with the law as it is written. I completely think it is scripted and makes no sense. It results in people who are not racist being accused of racist, and racists actually getting away with things they're not supposed to be able to get away with.
Like if you want to talk philosophy, like because I don't think philosophy is bad, by the way, or legal philosophy is bad. But in fact, here I think it would actually be really good to speak on the well, hold on. Mahmoud Khalil wasn't deported based on the Alien Exclusion Act. Wait, I keep mixing these up. It's the Alien Exclusion Act, right? I'm never going to remember this. No, the Alien Enemies Act. Fuck! Okay, he was deported based on the under the provisions of having a green card or whatever that make it so you can deport somebody providing material support for terrorists or whatever, right? I think that this is where a little bit of foreign politics or foreign policy understanding, I think, comes in. That I've stressed this a few times, and it's largely ignored, I guess, in domestic conversations. But that the world has changed in that terrorist groups now are sometimes state actors. I've brought this up as a challenge domestically in the United States. So, for instance, when we say don't support terrorists, ordinarily that's a pretty non-objectionable statement. But when terrorists are now governments, well, now we get into a really weird world. In the United States of America, I believe, and everyone in my audience should believe, you have the right to support the North Korean government. You have the right to support Iran, whatever. Like these governments are, I think they're abhorrent or whatever, but you have the right to support them, just like we have the right to protest against Vietnam. However, it can be a little bit hairier when you're talking about supporting, especially providing material support to individual terrorist groups or taking direction from individual terrorist groups. Like it gets weirder there. But when terrorist groups have now become governments of people, like Hamas has, this provides a lot of unique challenges both for international law and, in my opinion, for domestic law here. Because the question is, right, following this train of thought, if you were an immigrant of any kind in the United States, a lawful permanent resident, would you ever feel comfortable now protesting in support of the Palestinian people? I wouldn't. I would be terrified. Imagine you're at a rally for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and a few people there, you don't even realize it, but some people there have like pro-Hamas signs. Are you now subject to deportation under these immigration rules? I think the answer should be obviously no. That's not in the spirit of how that law was written, right? Destiny, I think the issue is that support is too broad. I actually don't agree that it's too broad. I want to say in the law, I think support is actually defined as material support. The public conversation we have is just that, oh, well, support just means you support them. But I don't think in the law that's how it's defined. We're just all saying that. Somebody can link it or read through it if they want, but yeah.
Play with. So this is okay. New York City has human rights law that protects 31 identifiable genders. It defines in their human rights code gender identity is self-expression. So I called a human rights lawyer, 3 of them actually, in New York. And I said, I'm trying to get an understanding of how this law would actually be applied. It says that the clothing you wear, the name you call yourself, you cannot be discriminated against in public accommodation based on these characteristics. They all agreed, yes. I had the law in front of me. I said, so if there is a clearly identifiable biological male wearing a dress with lipstick on who calls himself Susan and says he's a her, they cannot discriminate. This person gets hired for a job. They're allowed to wear female clothing. Absolutely. I said, okay, what if someone dresses up in a fursuit, a furry, and they refer to themselves as Vociferon, Herald of the Winter Mists? I'm intentionally making it
absurd. Yeah.
They all said the courts would laugh that out of the courtroom. You'd never get through. They would fire you in 2 seconds. I said, why is a judge allowed to laugh at an individual's identity that the law supposedly protects? And they said, because the judges can interpret as they see fit. And I said, then there may as well be no law at all.
I know, but that's the conclusion there. That can't be right? Because what you're saying is then judges can't interpret the provision of the INA.
Laugh at a transcript.
Okay, but then you're not stating your position. You're just stating basically it's a real fact that judges are going to do what judges are going to do. Indeed,
my position is this will go to a hearing, and the INA gives.
The problem is that Tim is doing the continuum fallacy as expressed by the Loki's wager story, right? Where Loki gets captured, or not captured, I think it's Loki's wager. He makes a bet with a couple of dwarves, and he loses the bet, and what he'd bet was his head. And the dwarves go to take his head, and Loki says, you can have my head, because that's what we bet, but you can't take an inch of my neck. And so they bend him over, they have the axe ready, and they're trying to figure out, like, well, where does his head stop and the neck begin? And they can't determine like exactly that point. So then Loki walks, okay, like the trickster he is. I don't know why this applies to Loki. Isn't there like a trickier god to talk about? This is like a parable expression of the continuum fallacy. Just because it's hard to tell when one thing becomes another thing doesn't mean that these two things aren't separate and distinct. And it doesn't mean that we would say they don't exist at all. For instance, we all agree that a grain of sand exists. We all agree that a pile of sand exists. We wouldn't call 5 grains of sand a pile of sand. We wouldn't be able to say exactly when a certain amount of grains become a pile of sand, but we do agree that these are 2 distinct things. Just because some judges might disagree on the edge cases doesn't mean we can throw all of it out. That's just not true. That's not how any human thinks about anything.
The Secretary of State the right to deport, and I don't see any reason why they can't do that.
Okay, so but my question...
Loki is the trickster god? Oh, in my mind, Loki just shoots lightning at people, but maybe that's... Wait, I'm thinking of Thor. Wait, who is Loki? Why do I think of Loki as lightning? Maybe just because it sounds like... Oh, no, he is the tricky guy. Never mind, just kidding. Makes sense then.
This will go to a hearing, and the INA gives Secretary of State the right to deport, and I don't see any reason why they can't do that.
Okay, so but my question for you, which you dodged, and I'm going to ask it again, is if Trump said we're deporting him because he's a Muslim, you would say...
Yes.
Wait, so you would not condemn Trump for that?
No. You asked me if...
Would you condemn him for it?
Let me slow down.
Yeah.
You asked me if Donald Trump said we're deporting him for being a Muslim, would you object to
condemn
it?
it?
I said yes.
Okay, why would
Did I literally say
okay,
yes?
so why would you not condemn him? So the First Amendment says...
Because he's not saying it's because he's a Muslim.
No, I understand that, but this is why. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Presumably, you would condemn him for violating the First...
Somebody says they define support as material support here, any property, tangible or intangible, or service, including currency or monetary instruments or financial securities, financial services, lodging, training, expert advice or assistance, safe houses, false documentation or identification, communications equipment. Yeah, okay. Which makes sense. We probably wouldn't want somebody in the United States providing these types of services to Al-Qaeda, right?
First Amendment for violating the religion clauses of the Constitution.
87 years ago, I actually, I thought of that. Why didn't the dwarves reverse trick Loki and say, okay, you're right, we can't figure out, we're not going to take any of your neck, we're just going to chop half your head off. Yeah, and call it even.
No law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Presumably, you would condemn him for violating the First Amendment for violating the religion clauses of the Constitution.
I think distributing material directly made to garner support for Hamas, which was made by Hamas, should be added to material support. If you could prove that the material came directly from Hamas and then was given to them for distribution, and that the person knew that at the time they received it and distributed it, then maybe.
Establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Presumably, you would condemn him for violating the First Amendment for violating the religion clauses of the Constitution, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And the First Amendment also says, do not abridge the freedom of speech, Congress. So by the same provision, the INA that you cited says he gives the right to do it, you would condemn Trump if he cited that provision, and in part of his rationale he said, well, because he's Muslim, but if another part of the First Amendment is invoked as a rationale, now it's different. And now you're not applying that.
And my position is, and has been on the Mahmoud Khalil case, is that claiming he's aligned with Hamas is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's ridiculous. However, the INA says they can deport non-citizens.
But it also says that if they were to put up a rationale of Muslim. But you
like the rationale matters. The argument that you use here matters, right? If a police officer sees you punch somebody in the face and then you run down the street and the police officer runs and arrests you, and the police officer says, "Get over here, darky, I'm arresting you because you're black," and they arrest you, that'll get tossed. You have to cite and this might be a bad example because technically a police officer doesn't have to tell you the probable cause or whatever. But like if somebody's engaged in a manner and they're citing something, or they say to a judge, you know, when they do the PC evaluation or whatever, like, you know, what was the probable cause? How did you do this? And the guy says, "Oh, he was black. I figure, you know," then it'll get tossed. Even if he was doing something bad, even if you saw him do something bad, the citation that you give is important. This is one of the reasons why DACA survived Trump trying to get rid of it, is because the rationale that Trump gave was dog shit, or in a legal term, arbitrary and capricious. There was no good reason given for why he was trying to rescind this law, and it would cause a whole bunch of headache for the federal government, so fuck off. You can't just give random fuck reasons. It'll get tossed, as it should, right?
We'll condemn one and not the other.
No, I literally condemned both. I said claiming that he's aligned with Hamas is stupid and wrong. But
He deported because he... Sorry. So if Trump actually initiated deporting proceedings, so what I understand is you have not condemned this deportation proceeding. You haven't, but you would condemn a hypothetical deportation proceeding because he's a Muslim.
No, slow down. They can deport anybody they want.
On any basis. And
It literally says that in the INA.
And you wouldn't condemn it. On any basis, and you wouldn't condemn it.
On any basis, a little bit too absolute.
Stale, I see you in chat. There are still negative comments on me that show up on LSUp sometimes. I don't know if the $1,000 a week that I send you is not enough. I'm tapping my Mossad contacts to get a little bit more, but I need you to do something about these, okay?
I'm sure there's some rationale where I'm going to be like, a guy discovered that Trump punched a baby, so they deported him quickly. I'd be like, whoa.
So would you condemn a deportation?
What if we did the same for information disseminated from Russia? As an American citizen, you have a right to do any of that. You're totally fine. You're totally within your rights to do that. Now, the only difference is if it's coming from a foreign actor, you just have to declare it, right? So that it's not a... you have to be a foreign registered agent to do it, right?
Some rationale where I'm going to be like, a guy discovered that Trump punched a baby.
Debating Tim is beyond waste of time. Nor him nor his audience actually care. I don't know if Tim is gearing up to fucking do a turnabout or whatever, because I don't even know why. But I would say in this conversation, I think Tim has actually been pretty like libertarian. Like he's just kind of adhering to libertarian principles here, like which is much better than ordinarily. He's just like a Trump shill. So I think Tim's done. I think his contribution to the conversation. There's stuff I disagree with, but it seems like you just follow on like libertarian lines rather than like the strict Trump dick suck lines, which I appreciate. So
they can deport anybody they want.
On any basis. And
It literally says that in the INA.
And you wouldn't condemn it. On any basis, and you wouldn't condemn it.
On any basis, a little bit too absolute. I'm sure there's some rationale where I'm going to be like, a guy discovered that Trump punched a baby, so they deported him quickly. I'd be like, whoa.
So would you condemn a deportation proceeding that was based on religion, even notwithstanding the fact that you wouldn't condemn that?
I'm trying to explain. Slow down. If he said, "I don't want a Muslim, get him out of here," I'd say,
want a black. Get him out.
Get out. Whoa. What do you think? Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. That's a stupid. You can't do that. That's not a real reason. That's the rationale. And then we go to the INA and I say, "Oh, Congress passed a law saying they can deport anybody they want for any reason at any time."
They haven't done that. I don't agree with your reading of the INA, but I just want to be... I'm assuming...
Correct me if I'm wrong. It says at his own discretion.
It says every alien... Oh, so this is... you're looking at section 222?
221. Subsection I.
So after the issuance of a visa or other documentation to any alien, the consular officer or the Secretary of State may at any time in his discretion revoke such visa or other documentation. Notice of such ratification shall be communicated to the Attorney General, and such ratification shall invalidate...
Screwed ass, he never reads his chat unless you say that or ask if he reads YouTube chat. Please constantly cut. JK, have a good day. Fuck you. I would ban you if I knew how to.
The visa or other document from the date of issuance, provided that carriers or transportation companies... Okay, so all that other stuff. So
the other stuff is related to like...
Go upwards. Does this apply to LPRs?
Yes.
Go upwards.
Yes.
This is...
But even... So go up. Go up to the top of the section.
Here's
Here's where you have a problem, Pisco.
Yeah, what's the problem?
It's that he's held the same way that he can be denied a visa. They're held as the Supreme Court says you can hold him to the same standard with respect to maintaining that visa or green card. You cannot lie on it. You cannot say on a form, I'm not going to do this. And then if it turns out that they change the status, or in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, where they actually lie on their application for one reason or another. I don't know if that lie was because they were afraid of further.
That's not why they got rid of him, though. If he lied on his application and they wanted to go after him for lying on his application. Do you understand what I say? Like, the process matters. You understand this, right? Like, the process matters. If that's what you want to go after somebody for, then go after them for that. You can't just cite some random reason and then try to find some reason afterwards.
Investigations, which would clearly throw them out. We don't know what the issue is. But at the end of the day, you held to the same standard while you're residing here until such time as you are fully naturalized. Once someone is naturalized, and I believe this in my heart of hearts to be both constitutionally correct, morally correct, and legally correct.
Bullshit. It's absolute fucking bullshit that these guys who fucking, wrap themselves in the First Amendment so much are all of a sudden okay with so many more restrictions on speech. Like, it's such bullshit. Embarrassing.
Once someone is fully naturalized and becomes an American citizen, that blessing of that work to attain that is conferred upon them the very special status that America affords her own citizens. And that status does not get afforded simply because they filled out a form and managed to get a visa.
You didn't just have a visa, you had a green card. Going from green card to citizen is relatively easy. Getting the green card is the hard part, okay? Like, my understanding, I'm pretty sure for me and Melina, that took like, now because of COVID as well, that was like 3 or 4 fucking years to get that fucking green card. Citizenship status is basically like, don't do some insane shit and then stay in the country for, because it was a marriage one, it might have been provisional, but like 2 to 5 years, and then you reapply for either a green card, and then you do your citizenship thing. Like, the green card is the hard part. The citizenship is relatively easy once you have the green card.
A green card.
Joe, I like you.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I like you. What Tim just said was fucking crazy. I need you to acknowledge that.
I don't know what he said.
What Tim just said is that legally, the Secretary of State or any member of the administration, I'll even assume the law says what it says and it applies to green cards. For any reason, they can deport any alien.
I think the threshold is literally what a threshold I've said now 4 times, which is facially legitimate and bona fide.
He said he would not condemn a deportation.
That's his moral. That's his morality.
What's crazy about me saying America's for American citizens?
What about no, I'm not saying that is crazy for you to say America's for American citizens, but I think that what America is defined largely by the Constitution, right? America is not just a geographical space, right? It's also this pronouncement says we, the people of the United States, are enacting, right? We are actually doing something here with.
I never expected. Also, I am glad that I felt this way for a long time. That libertarians are just fucking conservatives in disguise, or have been at least for over a decade now. I blame the Tea Party actually for doing that, because the Tea Party hijacked the concept of libertarian and just basically made them all Republicans. The instantaneous retreat from any principled attachment to things like freedom of speech has been, I'll say, shocking to say the least. Jesus.
The Constitution. America is defined by its Constitution. So for you to say something like Americans for American citizens, well, part of what America is the First Amendment. And so I respect what America.
Also, I'm sorry, fuck that comment from my subreddit. These people will defend gallows. I think that this should be the most scary thing, because it shows you, it is demonstrating that Trump supporters will support basically anything. That you can go to the outer perimeter of insane shit now that people used to say about Republicans, 7 or 8 years ago, and now it seems to be the case that it's probably true that a conservative will defend almost anything that this administration does. And that's just being demonstrated time and time and time and time and time again. The invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, the signal group chat leak shit, just everything will be defended. Anything and everything will be defended by the current conservative voter base. It's just
is in its highest ideals, and that would be, even if I think that America in principle should cater to citizens more, if America does something that violates its principles, like discriminating on the basis of religion,
why would you?
I would call it out.
I actually think when you map the political conflict we've had over the last 15 years, you come.
You think that maggots will actually defend with the Second Amendment or let Trump take it away? MAGA would let Trump take away the Second Amendment. They would. And my evidence for that is, I hadn't even seen this. Was this 5 years ago or was this 1 year ago? He was talking to Pam Bondi. I was shocked. If Kamala or Biden had made any statements about it was Pam talking to Trump about being able to take away guns from people for, I think it basically sounded like red flag laws, something like that. And Trump was fully on board for it.
Yesterday,
and it was like,
comes to protecting gun rights. This decision is.
They were both sitting at a table. It almost looked like it was like a big brown table. Does anybody have any idea what conversation I'm referring to?
Okay, Pam Bondi. What do I think? I'm getting this more.
It was, I think it might have been this.
Both sides of the aisle.
Maybe.
I think that has made a significant difference in.
I think Pam was basically talking about like taking guns away from people who were part of like domestic violence cases or something like that. And Trump was like, yeah, what? Otherwise, what? The cops are going to sit there and wait for 6 months, wait for a court to decide or something. It was like, it was a crazy set of statements. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? And I'd never heard these before. Fuck. And it sounds like chat hasn't either because you guys don't have.
Pam Bondi, Attorney General of Florida, and Mayor, thank you. I know you're going through a lot now. President, she was there that night with me. I think you were there with me until 3:30 in the morning when all these families were being notified, and it was horrific. So I know you've been through a lot, so thank you so much.
It might have been in this.
Great job. I have a couple issues that I'll wait, and do I talk about them now?
Talk about them.
Later?
You could talk.
Oh, wait.
Well, one, it addresses some of the...
I think it was.
Very talented people around this table.
This was in 2018. Bro, if Kamala or Hillary would have said this, these statements are insane. I can't believe I'd never seen this video before. I just saw it for the first time like a month ago.
To just introduce themselves quickly and say a few words, and maybe we can start off with Pam Bondi.
Thanks, President. I'm Pam Bondi, Attorney General of Florida, and Mayor, thank you. I know you're going through a lot now. President, she was there that night with me. I think you were there with me until 3:30 in the morning when all these families were being notified, and it was horrific. So I know you've been through a lot, so thank you so much.
Good job.
I have a couple issues that I'll wait and do I talk about them now?
Talk about them.
Later?
You can talk.
Well, one, it addresses some of the things you said in Florida. It's called the Baker Act, but it's our Civil Commitment Act, and it's weak, and it's about 1,000 pages long, and I've had my Solicitor General on it for 3 days now, working on it. We're rewriting it along with Governor Scott, who's you're going to meet with him. He's going to give you a ton of good information. We've been rewriting it, and we are going to bring in something called the Gun Violence Restraining Order. So if someone is civilly committed, and typically you can hold them for up to 72 hours, but people are getting out within 24 hours, the majority of them. So what we want to do is let law enforcement come in and take the guns.
Good.
They're a danger to themselves.
Which you can't
or
do
others.
right now.
Well, because without being adjudicated. So because they're a danger to themselves.
You want them to take the guns and
when they are
not go
committed.
through 6 months of legal trials and everything
Exactly.
else.
But we also have to give the mentally ill the due process in which they deserve, President. So what we're doing is they're going to be able to take the guns when they're taken into custody or into the hospital, and then when they're released within 24 hours or 72 hours later, typically it's 24 hours, but law enforcement will have 72 hours to determine whether they should give those guns back, or they can go to a judge and say, Your Honor, please keep these guns. We feel this person is still a danger to himself or others.
So this would not have worked
custody.
the way it's currently constituted. This would not have worked with Cruz as it's currently constituted.
As it's currently written.
So you're going to make changes?
We're going to make changes. And one other thing we're doing about the reporting, President, which is huge, this is a big issue. We need a clearinghouse, and that's what we've all been discussing. And we have created, and several of my counterparts have done it around the country, but we're the biggest state doing it. It's an app, because kids now are on social media. And there were so many warning signs on Snapchat, on Twitter, on Instagram, and they were posting them, they were sending them to all different sources. We're going to have, and we just got it written in our House and Senate budget, it'll cost at least $500,000 a year to fund this. But what it does, kids, and so I met with 10 students, and they loved it. And they said, I'm empowering them. 3 of them are my graphic designers. They're going to design the icons. Some are going to name it. They're helping us with it. But it'll cost probably about $100,000 maximum to develop. That's all in our budget. So what kids can do now, they can automatically send something that says, I'm going to buy a gun, just like Cruz was doing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And one of the girls who I met with, one of the students, told me he'd been doing this since middle school. He had bullied her, and she reported it. So it will all, they can instantly, and they can do it with anonymity. Put it in this app.
Good.
It'll go in the app, and it'll go to one clearinghouse with state law enforcement in Florida.
Well, you mentioned the internet. We have to look at the internet because a lot of bad things are happening to young kids and young minds, and their minds are being formed. And we have to do something about maybe what they're seeing and how they're seeing it, and also video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts. And then you go the further step, and that's the movies. You see these movies, they're so violent, and yet a kid is able to see the movie if sex isn't involved, but killing is involved. And maybe they have to put a rating system for that. And you get into a whole very complicated, very big deal. But the fact is that you are having movies come out that are so violent with the killing and everything else that maybe that's another thing we're going to have to discuss. And a lot of people are saying it. You have these movies today where you can go and have a child see the movie, and yet it's so violent and so disgusting. So we may have to talk about that also. Well, thank you very much, Pam.
It's just like he even says like we have to go in and take the guns. That would be a 4-second clip of Hillary or Kamala. It would be played endlessly. Well, they already played because Kamala had a misspeak, a crucial misspeak where it was in relation to assault rifles or something. When you listen to what she was talking about was obvious, and it was not really objectionable. But the thing that she had said, it made it sound like she wanted to like ban all assault rifles or something. The small clip that they'd taken. But like this has never been a part of her platform. She never said it in any other place. Now, conservatives explain this by saying, well, she let her master agenda slip, that she just wasn't going to, so she didn't mean it. But it's like, why would you run on a secret agenda? Wouldn't you want Democrats who hate guns to vote? It was stupid. But yeah, it was funny that like, I think a few weeks ago, somebody sent me this in totality, and I listened to it. So I'm like, wait, what the fuck? You go in and take the guns. Like, what the fuck? whatever. So anyway, all that to say that, yes, if Trump were to come out staunchly against the Second Amendment, there would be a good chunk of people that would make arguments for it and support him. Although maybe some people on the edges he would lose. There were some people that were mad, but remember, you know, the bump stock ban happened under Donald Trump. That was a Donald Trump thing. And Donald Trump is a New Yorker. Donald Trump doesn't like guns. He doesn't shoot. He doesn't give a fuck about this shit.
Come to realize that none of this is actually true. Neither faction really cares about any of the Constitutions, the Bill of Rights, the laws. It is simply a moral worldview in battle with another moral worldview.
Cringe.
A few examples being the liberal faction consistently trying to take away our right to keep and bear arms in various degrees, arguing that only militias can have them, that supporting assault weapons bans and calling for them more and more. That certainly violates the Second Amendment. Then you've got the First Amendment as it applies to we have a right to free speech. It's interpreted a bit beyond government passing a law with respect to an establishment of speech, because it actually restricts the government from using existing law to enforce against speech. But then you have, again, for the past 10 years, the liberal faction trying to use private equity and private resources to shut down the politics of their political opponents.
Did you call that out?
Private equity and private resources? That's not the government. You just said what it was about, to prevent Congress or the government through incorporation from preventing freedom of speech. What does that have to do with using private organizations to fight each other? Like, what?
Absolutely did. But see, that's my moral worldview. So when I say people have a right to express their political worldviews without fear of violence and harm.
Think about what you just heard. He said that somebody using a private equity, whatever the fuck that means, or a private business to try to shut down somebody's freedom of speech, he said that that's a First Amendment violation. But a lawful permanent resident having viewpoint distinguished reasons being given, like the fact that you support Hamas or support the Palestinians being used to deport you, that's not a First Amendment violation? Like, what?
Are we dealing with right now? There is no fucking reality where I am going to stand in defense of the moral worldview of the left that are firebombing Tesla dealerships in wanton.
That's the whole left? You get to generalize that to the entire left? You don't have to stand for that worldview, because guess what? It's illegal to firebomb Tesla dealerships. If they get caught, they get arrested. Like, we don't have to worry about that. That's not legal right now. That's still illegal. Nobody's trying to make that legal.
Of vehicles, and then they come to me and say, how could you not support Mahmoud Khalil? I'll be like, listen, the moral worldview you guys live in is might makes right, like the fucking Nazis. Okay, so
might makes right. This is from the guy who is defending the dude who's talking about invading fucking Greenland and invading the Panama fucking Canal and saying that Russia, you understand that our position on Russia-Ukraine is literally might makes right? Russia, it's realpolitik. It's realpolitik, my friend.
So you can make any argument you want to try to appeal to my view of the Constitution, and I'm going to say demons get no quarter.
So you're not going to stand on business because you hate
the left?
Yes. So I want to be clear. I condemn the Tesla bombers. That is fucking reprehensible. I don't agree with terrorism in this country. I'll call it terrorism. And I'll say, yes, that is terrorism. I condemn it. I think it's horrible. Yep. That's me calling out the left. Why would you say,
Don't worry, guys. Pisco, in his heart of hearts.
MAGA and what Trump has done to this country is a fucking disaster.
Is it unconstitutional to arrest a person's lawyers when they're facing criminal charges?
No. Why would it be unconstitutional?
So if a person is criminally charged, right? Let's say he's indicted, a mobster in New York. Yeah. He hires a lawyer. The lawyer starts drafting his legal defense, and then the AG of New York goes and arrests his lawyers.
Depends on what's
Depends on what you're arrested for. What do you mean? It's not illegal to arrest somebody. He's trying to tie this into some. Did this have to do with the Cohen case or something? Or
if the lawyer fucking shot someone,
No.
Okay, so
let me finish my question. They go to the lawyer and say, "You're with the fucking mobster. We're giving you 2 counts of RICO on top."
Oh no, sorry. So there you have a question of interpretation of RICO. Can RICO apply to legal advice? Okay, in that case, I'm going to have an issue with criminalizing conduct that amounts to legal advice, genuine legal advice.
Like when they arrested Trump's lawyers.
Sorry. I just want to be clear. There can be, in the course of pretending to give legal advice, if you are in a conspiracy to do some other crime, you would agree with this, right? If a lawyer says, "I'm giving you legal advice because I actually want you to do this crime," that's not protected, correct?
I don't know.
So you answer that question.
Hold on, I ask you a question.
Yeah. So
who is he talking to? This is the 180 rule. When you have cameras set up in such a way that the shot is changing, but you're not respecting the same viewpoint, it's hard to tell. Is Pisco talking to good logic here, or is he? Oh, I guess I've been on this set before, so I know. I think Pisco's on the far side of the table, and they're both over there.
Want you to do this crime? That's not protected, correct?
I don't know.
I can't tell. I think he's talking to good logic there. Good logic, I don't know why good logic doesn't instantaneously say, correct, that's not protected. One of the few times you can pierce the attorney-client privilege, because generally attorney-client conversations are privileged conversations, meaning that you can't bring them up in the court of law, you can't indict somebody based on something said to the lawyer, because the lawyer is just supposed to be an extension of yourself. However, if your lawyer is giving you advice on how to commit a crime, then there's an exception there called the crime fraud exception, which means now those statements can be brought in a court of law, and they can be used to indict you or your lawyer, right? They can be used as evidence against you. So of course that's true, but obviously that's true. Otherwise everybody just go to a lawyer for crime advice, right? Which you can't, you're not allowed to do that, you know?
You answer that question.
Hold on, I asked you a question.
Yeah, so I said no.
Okay, so when Jenna Ellis got arrested on 2 RICO counts.
She's part of a conspiracy to steal the election in 2020.
You see, that's the point. You decided to interpret legal advice as a crime.
No, because they're
You can't give people legal advice on how to commit crimes. You're not allowed to do that. For obvious reasons, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. But now we're going to play the game. And Tim, I guess, is allowed to because he's not a lawyer and he has no formal legal education and doesn't have informal legal education or whatever. But I played this with that Harvey Silvergate guy when I spoke with him, I think he's Eastman's lawyer. You can't say novel legal advice and just say that that's the reason why you're giving somebody guidance on how to commit crimes. Otherwise, you could literally just do, are you saying that criminal conspiracies are legal now as long as the person's a lawyer first? Like in that case, every single mobster would just make sure that all of their associates are lawyers. Like, oh, you can't indict any of us, we're all lawyers. See, we're just giving each other legal advice. Like, we're good. It's a giant fucking lawyer orgy fuckfest up in here, and nobody can be indicted for any conspiracy crimes because we're all just lawyers. We're just giving each other advice.
Second. So you're taking the view that nothing with respect to lawyers.
A lawyer who drafts a letter for a client should be criminally charged for it.
What if that
yes, if that letter is giving you advice on how to commit a crime. Correct, obviously. And in your world, lawyers should be able to give any piece of advice they want, and they're never criminally liable for it, even if they're literally telling you how to commit a crime. What if a lawyer wrote you a letter saying, this is the best way to murder your wife and get away with it? Do you think that type of behavior would be protected under attorney-client privilege?
Letter says with respect to hiring a mobster to hit someone.
Yes.
Did you say that?
Oh, nice. Thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Correct.
The lawyer participates.
Sorry, I'm going to ask the question again. If the lawyer drafts a letter to a mobster to get someone assassinated, would that be protected because it's the lawyer who drafted it?
Just for clarification.
Yes or no?
I need to clarify what you mean. You're saying the letter would instruct or attempt to bring a person in.
Or give advice on how to commit the crime. Here's how you can kill somebody and not get caught. It doesn't have to be telling them to. It'd be giving you advice on how to commit the crime as well. This is why generally, if you're talking to even like a CPA or somebody, and you're like, if I wanted to do like tax fraud or something, or they might say something like, I'm not going to tell you that you can do this, or I can't give you advice on this, but there might be like a blah, blah, blah. And they'll usually their hands off there because they'll never give you formal advice on how to do it because they can be liable for that.
Into either both. Let's do the two examples. You can answer both. One is it gives advice for how to get away with hiring a mobster, or it says these are instructions for hiring this particular mobster. Wait, I'm going to get an answer to this question. Wait,
here's why you don't deserve it.
I'm going to get an answer.
Oh
my God.
I don't want to speak for you. I'm just telling you this is the disingenuousness with which you're addressing this. Because when we're talking about Mahmoud Khalil, you talk about things that he likely has done, and you say we can't bring those facts up because
he's such a hack fuck. I hate him. We talk about things he likely has done. According to who? Put it in the record then, right? Put it in the record somewhere. Indict him with a crime. Go to some immigration judge. Do arbitrate. Like, you can't say likely according to what? Fucking videos on YouTube? There's no record. There's not a legal record of any of this because there's no due process. Well, sorry. The Venezuelan case is really heavy in my mind. I don't know what Mahmoud Khalil is going through right now in terms of his due process, so he might have due process stuff. But in that case, put that in that record. Charge him with a crime somewhere. Put him in front of an immigration judge and present him with a crime, with an arraignment.
Because he's not charged by the government. So we have to pretend that those facts have not happened and say that.
Correct. You can't consider facts that haven't been presented during a proceeding or things being considered. Yes, that's how that works.
Even if he's engaged in those, well, that doesn't count because after all, he's not charged with them. He's not charged with them. We have to pretend that these things never happened. And that's when we're talking about addressing wrongs committed by someone who's associated with the left. When you're talking about Jenna Ellis, you're saying, when you're trying to theorize how her legal advice could somehow morph into being something that's illegal and would deserve for her to be charged as a conspirator or a RICO charge, you actually have to invent some crazy thing. Not that anything.
You're not following the conversation.
I am following the conversation perfectly. What I'm saying is it's disingenuous. The disingenuousness comes from the fact that when it comes to analyzing the left, you refuse to deal with facts that exist as they are and says because that's not charged, we can't talk about it. When it comes to analyzing the right, however, you think it's totally fair to try and impugn their behavior, their conduct, and saying, well, it could be if they would have done this and start inventing brand new hypotheticals as a way of trying.
Pisco is using a hypothetical here because the entire case is hypothetical. Mahmoud Khalil is not a hypothetical case. That's a real case.
To now attach some possible culpability to the actions that they took.
Tim is attacking my consistency. In essence, he's saying these rights are ephemeral. These rights are kind of contingent.
Your view of them are. I think you've concluded that.
Well, if I were to cite Supreme Court precedent, would you say they're ephemeral?
Which Supreme Court precedent?
Here we have the case of Bridges versus Wexton that says that resident aliens.
That's bullshit that Tim even gets to ask Pisco that question because imagine if Pisco didn't have an answer here, right? Now we've already got that 48 case of the Wixton or whatever. But it's not like Tim Pool knows any of these fucking cases, right? So but whatever.
Aliens have First Amendment rights.
Sure do. How does that apply to the INA?
Well, even as against the INA, that was a case. Now it's a pre-INA case, but if it would be no different.
So it's superseded. We need the Supreme Court to rule on this as to how it applies because it came after the fact.
These particular facts and circumstances, there's no on-point case that specifically defines this case. And any lawyer worth their salt can find some way to distinguish a case and say this is on Wednesday, not Tuesday. But I want to. He's attacking me, saying I'm dodging things or I'm okay with one hypothetical, not the other. That is completely not true. So Tim is.
Jenna Ellis committed a crime.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What did she do?
Yeah, she conspire to get these false slates of electors, and by being part of a conspiracy, criminal conspiracy. No, it's
What did
not.
she do?
So, do you know what a conspiracy is?
Oh my God.
What did she do?
A conspiracy. You know what a conspiracy?
For a conspiracy, you don't have to do anything with the web. No, that's not true. For a conspiracy, all you need is the plan and one step taken towards the towards the execution of that plan. However, the Georgia case, I believe, is a RICO case, so that gets a lot weirder. I haven't read RICO cases. My understanding of RICO for racketeering is basically a criminal entity exists, and then that criminal entity is aimed towards some criminal thing, or an entity exists is aimed towards some criminal action. And as long as you've helped the entity, then you're considered part of the thing that you'll be charged under RICO, I believe. So RICO, I believe, is distinguished from a criminal conspiracy charge, in that I believe you can do actions. I don't know what the mens rea is for like RICO related stuff. Like, I don't know how aware you have to be, or like what the underlying elements are. I can't speak at all. I shouldn't. I have no idea. I don't know for RICO.
What did she do?
Do you know what a conspiracy is?
What did she do?
So there was a criminal meeting of the minds, an agreement. Okay, so do you agree that conspiracy is a thing?
I can answer the question.
Yeah, so I said...
Because I think for Jenna Ellis, isn't that just part of the Georgia RICO thing? Because I don't know if conspiracy would apply here, but Pisco would know better than me, so... It is Georgia, okay. Yeah, and it is the racketeering thing.
Criminal conspiracy. Was that an answer?
What did Jenna Ellis do? You are deflecting.
No. So I said criminal conspiracy. Is that an answer?
What did she do?
So she had an agreement with Donald Trump and other co-conspirators to steal the 2020 election in Georgia. In the case of Georgia.
What did she do?
She had a criminal conspiracy.
That's circular. You're saying she was,
not.
Hold on. You're saying she was charged with conspiracy because she had a conspiracy.
No.
You're asking what action?
Charged with conspiracy because she had a conspiracy is not circular. It's a causal. Now you're saying, why did she engage in a conspiracy? She engaged in a conspiracy because she was planning on helping another person commit a crime. And when you take plans to do a crime and then you take steps towards the completion of the crime, you're now guilty of conspiracy, even if you hadn't done the crime itself. If I go to the store and I buy a baseball bat, I haven't committed a crime. And if I tell my friend, we should fucking murder, we should go beat up Josiah with a bat, I haven't committed a crime. But if I have a conversation with a friend and I say, let's go buy a bat and beat the shit out of Pisco, okay, because fuck him, and then we go to the store and then we buy the bat, if you have evidence of the conversation and then you've seen that we've done, that we've taken the first step towards that crime, then that's a conspiracy. Can you do conspiracy to commit an assault? I feel like there's probably different conspiracy. Like, only some crimes qualify for conspiracy. We'll say we were going to kill him or whatever, right? Because I don't know if you can you do like conspiracy to like a misdemeanor crime? I have no idea. Probably not. Or maybe you can. I don't know. But yeah, conspiracy is just you have the plan, the meeting of the minds, and then you've taken one step towards the completion of that plan.
And she took that violated the law.
Yeah, so the action of the overt acts of communicating with other members of the conspiracy, helping them, giving them resources.
That's not what she was charged with.
No, she was charged with conduct related to the attempted theft of the election. And I don't, as I sit here, I don't know the.
It was for drafting a letter.
Facts. Yeah. So
requesting like legal documents from the state.
Requesting documents.
Said was in furtherance of the conspiracy.
Requesting documents to get fake slates of electors and to try to steal the election.
You see, again,
yes or no?
This is where the debate usually stops.
Why?
In the 1960 election.
Because you leftists. Oh, God, please tell me Pisco knows this. Oh, he's going to bring up the Hawaii election. It's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. That was done with the approval of the state legislature. Everybody in the country knew that this was going on. Nothing about this was illegal. And they said that you... He's going to bring up the Hawaii shit. Sorry, real quick. The Hawaii election was incredibly close, okay? It was so close. It was within like 130 fucking votes or something, 160 votes. And what Hawaii said is we're going to do a recount. However, our recount's not going to be done in time to transmit our votes to be in compliance with the Electoral Count Act. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to send you 2 slates of electors, and then based on the outcome of a recount, you guys will authorize one set or the other, okay? The state legislature okayed that. Everybody knew about that and it was okay. This is not the same as Donald Trump, the Republicans procuring 7 false slates of electors under fucking, under cover of night and crazy weird ways that they tried to do this, and then to send them in just to get Pence to throw them out, to throw out the real electors in favor of their fake slates. It's not even remotely the same thing. Sorry. Pisco knows this. He knows this. He knows this. I know he knows this. He knows this.
I've had this debate 800 million times. JFK, Nixon, the uncertified slate was sent for JFK, even though the election had already been called. They did not resolve the case until after the count had the safe harbor provisions, but they decided we're going to send an uncertified slate anyway, and it was never considered fake. Now, if there was Supreme Court precedent set after the fact that uncertified slates of electors, meaning electors that were not duly elected but were submitted anyway, if they set precedent saying you cannot do this, and Congress passed a law saying this is expressly illegal, I'd agree with you. But they didn't. So the legal theory that emerges in the 2020 case, though I disagree, I think Trump lost, I disagree with the people who think Trump won, was they've done this in the past. Why don't we have our electors submit before the safe harbor provisions, just like they did in Hawaii? Then Pence can choose to count or otherwise, depend based upon what the judges rule. Now,
because that's not what they did, and that's not what the plan was. The plan was to falsely assert that there had been election inconsistencies or to falsely assert that they had evidence of voter fraud. None of this was based on any true, actual disagreement. Also, their claims for what they wanted Pence to do had to do with allegations of crimes and election rigging, not a legitimate recount that had been triggered in Hawaii, but...
If Donald Trump takes issue with an election, or anybody, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, whoever,
Pisco knows
and they
this.
say,
He knows this. He knows
one,
this. He
we
knows
are
this.
required legally to submit any formal paperwork before the safe harbor deadline. Afterwards, we cannot. I don't see how that's a criminal action. More importantly, if Trump goes...
Because no one has been charged with it before? You think it's not criminal?
Because there's no codified law saying it's illegal. The government doesn't...
There are laws against...
You don't have to have a law saying every... Like, there are going to be some, like, catch-alls, like, especially when it comes to doing conspiracies, right? So... There's not a law that says that I can't, like, buy a baseball bat, right? There's not a law that says there's a whole bunch of shit in a conspiracy charge that isn't necessarily individually on its own an illegal action, right?
RICO does not apply.
Wait. So RICO can't apply in any novel situation. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, but you're making my point for me. That you've decided to interpret legal advice as a crime to use power against a political...
So I ask, can legal advice be a crime? And you objected and you said he doesn't need to answer it. So I asked you a question. Can legal advice itself be a crime?
Yes.
I'm not aware. In some circumstances...
Oh my God! If you wouldn't even answer the hypothetical, then why even have the conversation?
The answer you don't know.
Can legal advice be a crime? Let's broaden that.
So, why don't you answer?
No, just answer that question. Can legal... Like, this is an obvious yes. Remember, okay... I don't know if we have... Do we have a funny name for this type of meme or whatever, for whatever Tim Pool's doing right now? If somebody refuses to engage with a hypothetical ever, or they're constantly trying to requalify, it's because they know that they are intellectually bankrupt in their position. They know that they're being silly and goofy. If they're completely unwilling to ever answer a hypothetical, they know it's because they're being a little goofer, okay? They're being a little goofer.
You can say you don't know. Yeah, do you not understand the terms? It can't be. So if I give you legal advice on how to... Do you agree with that, by the way?
What?
Do you agree that legal advice can't be a crime?
Cannot?
Cannot be a crime. Do you agree with him?
If so, I don't... When you're saying advice... No,
this is the problem.
Fuck, guys.
Oh my
No,
God.
because it doesn't make sense. Your question doesn't make sense.
You don't understand the terms?
If someone comes to me and says,
Like,
hey...
this is such an obvious... It's a crime fraud exception. This is not debated. Nobody seriously debates this, okay? Sorry, hold on. This is so stupid. Attorney-client privilege does not cover statements made by a client to their lawyer if the statements are meant to further or conceal a crime. For this exception to apply, the client must have been in the process of committing a crime or planning to commit a crime. The exception may apply in some types of civil cases as well, such as when a client is planning to perpetuate fraud or another tort. The line between criminal and civil case can be blurred because some conduct, such as assault, can result in blah, blah, blah. So for civil cases, maybe it's a little blurrier, but some of the crimes that arise in this context include crimes that are meant to obstruct an investigation or ongoing prosecution. A client might tell an attorney that their intent to tamper with witnesses or destroy evidence of a crime. They may tell the attorney that they will induce a witness to commit perjury by lying during their testimony, or they may ask the attorney to help them by presenting false evidence. In some cases involving financial crimes, falsifying information about income or hiding assets may trigger the crime fraud exception. So this will allow you to pierce the veil between the attorney and the client, meaning that now these statements are admissible in court and can be used to convict you, right? They can be used as evidence against you. The lawyer themselves could also come under criminal charges if they are... If a lawyer knows, if a lawyer knows that a witness plans to commit perjury or has committed perjury, they have a duty to disclose this information to the court. However, they may not have a duty to disclose perjured testimony by their client. The lawyer instead may ask the court to allow them to withdraw from the case and allow the client to find a new attorney without telling the judge that the reason for their withdrawal is the perjury. The judge may suspect that this is the reason, but attorneys often have other reasons to withdraw, so the judge may not be certain. This is such a stupid, I don't know why, whatever.
This is a crime I want to commit, right? Someone calls me up and says, "Hey, this is a crime I want to commit." I cannot further assist him. It would be wrong for me to then at that point say, "This is how you can."
So can legal advice? Wait, so can
but
we're going to
I can tell him.
Stop. We're going to get clear answers.
Yes.
We're going to get clear.
Can legal advice be a crime?
I'm answering the question.
Can legal advice be a crime? Yes or no? No.
So
what's your answer, Joe?
What I'm saying is, if you're giving it ethically, it cannot be.
Okay.
Oh my God! So then yes. If you have to add a qualifier, then the answer is yes, right? You would agree with that, right? If I ask you, can this be this? And you go, well, as long as, if you're giving any type of qualifier, then that means that then it can be, right? Then the answer is yes. You had to add a qualifier. So does that mean, because then Pisco's next question should be, okay, so then could unethical advice be a crime? Is unethical legal advice a crime? Because ethical legal advice isn't. You had to draw the distinguishing thing, right? So if unethical legal advice can be a crime, is unethical legal advice a type of legal advice? Fuck me, dude. Holy shit.
Assume you're giving it unethically. Can it be a crime? Yes or no? We're going to get a
thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Pisco. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Jesus.
No, we're not.
Yes, we are.
You're playing a semantic game.
No, it's not semantic. Okay. Assuming
Make
you're
good
giving
logic
it unethically. Can it be a crime? Yes or no? We're going to get a conflict here.
No, we're not.
Yes, we are.
You're playing a semantic game.
No, it's not semantic at all.
It certainly is.
What about it is semantic?
It's 100% semantic.
Colloquially, any person who is asked,
and now he's calling it
are you legally, do you have a legal right to legal advice? 100% yes.
Yes.
When you use the phrase legal advice, you're playing a semantic game as to the definition you are choosing.
What do you mean
to
by
use.
legal advice then? I'll ask you.
So if I go to a lawyer and say,
What do you mean by legal advice?
I'm telling you. Okay. So here's an example. We want to do a sweepstakes. We want to actually give our members at timcast.com once a month, we choose someone $10,000. If the lawyer then says, that's illegal, you can't do that. I say, oh, okay, thank you. Now, what if they say, ooh, there's legalities which could make that illegal. Here's how you avoid breaking the law and actually make this work. That's not illegal.
So
because he's telling you how to not break the law. He's telling you how to. He's literally giving you advice to not break the law.
I'm asking you, as a definitional term, are you willing to provide a definition in your mind for what legal advice is, yes or no?
Legal advice is instruction and knowledge applied to an individual to better help them understand the law and how it applies to their circumstances.
In using that definition, can legal advice be a crime?
If it's just helping them understand, no, it's not.
Helping them with the purpose of, so I'll just be clear. Using that definition, providing legal advice for the purpose of helping someone carry out a crime.
No.
I didn't say that.
No. He used a broader definition of legal advice.
Okay, let's try again. Let me try again. Here we go. Here's why you're wrong.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
a guy calls his lawyer and says, hey man, I need money. And I'm trying to figure out how to get it. If I were to go to a guy and point a weapon at him and say, can I borrow $50? Is that illegal? And the lawyer's gonna go, yeah, that's illegal. You can't do that. That's you're robbing him. You go to jail. Really? What if I just like put my hand in my pocket so it looked like I had a gun? You're still robbing. That's illegal. Interesting. So I can't do that. No, you can't. And if you do something like that, you'll go to jail. All right. Thank you for the advice. I'm gonna construct my actions now in a way that applies to the legal advice you gave me to help me carry out that crime.
No.
The lawyer is not helping you commit the crime. Steel just can't be built on this surface. What the fuck? Wait, how do you... What boxes am I allowed to use in space?
Hang on.
Lawyer going to jail for that?
So what if the intention of a lawyer was to further that crime and make it more likely?
You're a mind reader now?
No. In the criminal law, we do this.
Why do you say, thank you, yes, Pisco, thank you for saying this. Are you a mind reader now? Excuse me, state of mind and ascertaining state of mind is a prerequisite to basically every single criminal charge. You understand that, right? Crimes require a mens rea. They require a criminal state of mind to be convicted of the crime. Crimes are not things that happen by accident. You have to have the prerequisite state of mind to be convicted of the crime that you've committed. 99% of the time. Sorry.
This all the time.
Thank you.
The
Yes.
intention of a lawyer was to further that crime and make it more likely.
You're a mind reader now?
No. In the criminal law, we do this all the time.
You have to.
Mens rea.
Indeed.
It's not even that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. And not only do you do it all the time, you have to do it. By definition, you have to do this, right?
One of the biggest things that you have to do as a criminal lawyer
You have
is,
to, yes.
if you're a prosecutor, is to
Thank
prove mens
you.
rea. So I'll ask you, what if the purpose of the lawyer was to actually get him to commit the
Like
crime?
Saul Goodman.
Yeah. So wait, but I'm gonna get some answers from you guys one of these days. So if the purpose,
You give answers every time. If somebody dodges a question, answer yes
if the purpose of the advice is to further the crime, to make it happen, to have the outcome happen, that legal advice? Can that
It
be
is
a
no
crime?
longer legal advice. It is criminal
So
advice. It is
what you've done
accomplice.
is you put in your definition of legal advice. You're saying legal advice by definition can't be illegal. And if your definition of legal advice says it can't be illegal, then I guess you're by definition correct. But
let me
most people's
ask
definition
you.
of legal advice doesn't include, it has to be legal advice.
Do people have a constitutional right to counsel?
Yes.
Yes.
But that means they could be providing illegal activities to a defendant.
They could be.
Do people have a constitutional right to some illegal activities?
So they have a constitutional right to legal advice, but doesn't mean that
This
it's...
is a semantic issue.
No, it's not semantic. I'm happy to answer that question. They have a legal right to legal advice, 100%, to access and retrieve that legal advice. That doesn't mean that the advice they receive can also be a crime. There's no contradiction there.
And
Agree?
so the challenge-
Do you agree there's no contradiction there?
No.
What's the contradiction?
When we refer to legal advice, we are not referring to engagement in criminal activity. And if you have two guys and they're not lawyers, and one guy is advising the other guy on how to rob a bank, that's not legal advice. Just because you have a law degree doesn't make it legal advice.
Well, okay, so your definition of legal advice, that would be legal advice. I mean, if you gave a definition that didn't say, and by the way, the legal advice can't be part of a criminal conspiracy, you're carving out the thing that would be
to definitionally understand what is our constitutional right to counsel versus what is an illegal action.
So the right to counsel doesn't mean that the counsel you're receiving is legal itself. So they're different things, and there's no contradiction in what I'm saying.
To be honest, none of it really matters.
Why?
Because the interpretation of the actions of Jenna Ellis and Trump's other lawyers, I forgot their names, based in Wisconsin, was that Donald Trump approached them and said, how do I legally challenge an election? And they said, here's how you do it, and we'll draft it for you. And the government went, aha! We think that's a crime, so you're under arrest.
All right, so let me change that. So only hypothetical, just to make sure that this principle is being applied consistently.
If somebody were to come up to you and say, how can I legally murder my wife? Are you good there? Like, you can't do that, right? Again,
Let's say that Jenna Ellis...
like, just to be clear, so that you guys understand this, right? There is a lot of like tricky Reddit arguments, and maybe even in movies they do this, where somebody's like, I actually, now it looks like I murdered my wife, but I actually did this on opposite day. Or I was in the state of Alabama, and there's a 400-year-old thing from the Mignonachikosaki tribe that has never been overruled before that says that murder actually means, like putting a Band-Aid on somebody and not shoving a knife through their throat. So actually, it's okay. Like, these don't fly in court, right? A judge will look at this. There will be reasonable interpretations that are set forth. Like, this idea that you could be like all sneaky deaky, like, there's no way that you could even interpret this is bullshit. This is stupid. This doesn't work like this. Okay.
And aha! We think it's a crime, so you're under arrest.
All right, so let me change that. So let me hypothetical just to make sure that this principle is being applied consistently. Let's say that Jenna Ellis said, okay, this won't work, this won't work. What you have to do is you have to order the military to seize the halls of Congress and hold at gunpoint all the Congress people. And that will be, that way it'll just be the best way to do it.
That's an absurdity.
No, you can say it's an absurdity.
I can't do any hypothetical.
It's called a hypothetical. And you provide hypotheticals, people. Are you going to say you're not going to answer it?
Unprecedented absurdity without codified law.
This whole thing is unprecedented. You understand that sometimes you have to be able to deal with unprecedented things, right?
Answer it, or you're going to say it's illegitimate. I don't have to answer it.
I'll answer any question you ask.
So if the question is,
if the Marshmallow Man showed up, should call in the Ghostbusters next.
so if Jenna Ellis said something to the effect of, the best way to do this, Donald Trump, and she wanted this to happen, right? Is for you to actually go with tanks into Congress, hold up some Congress people, kill them if you don't want, if they're challenging you. That way you head off any kind of impeachment.
So you're saying she instructed them to murder people?
Oh my God. The most literal fucking interpretation possible. Jesus, okay.
Seize it and murder if necessary.
In what prospect of law can you go to a court and murder someone in the middle of the hearing?
You're saying the best. So this is why it's legal advice. She says one thing that could stop you from stealing the election would be if they held impeachment proceedings and immediately impeachment removed you. So one way to head that off from a legal perspective would be if those people could not attend their sit-ins. And I'm just letting you know it would be really convenient if you killed them. And I want you to do that.
So instructing someone to commit murder is legal advice.
I'm asking.
It's not legal advice.
If you said, for example, in order to prevent this bad outcome, this bad judgment, you should kill. You should kill a witness.
But there's no function of law where you're allowed to do that. There's no legal advice. That's a crime. It's murder.
It's tailored to.
No. Excuse me. What crime did she commit? By just telling Trump she's not committing murder, right? He would have to. Tim should acknowledge that she's not committing murder. So what crime would she be charged with?
A legal matter. It's tailored to a specific proceeding. Here we're talking about.
It's not legal advice to instruct your client to murder someone. No.
Okay. So if your definition of legal advice excludes any illegal conspiracy, then by definition you've said.
Then Pisco can just say, okay, fine. Then we agree. You're just using different terms, which is fine. You're a layman. That's okay. We're just using different terms. Then. So you agree though that you could be charged with a crime here because this wouldn't be legal advice, right? So then we agree, for instance, that your lawyer could tell you things that in Tim's world, in Tim's mind, wouldn't qualify as legal advice, which is fine. Then you can just say that. That's cool. Then we agree then. Okay, we're using different terms. That's okay.
You're trying to justify that Trump, under a circumstance with no codified law making it illegal,
we're backing up. We're in very specific territory right here, Tim. And the specific territory is...
Where in the law does it say you cannot send in your slave electors before the safe harbor deadline?
Why should it have to say that?
To make it a crime.
Why?
Because in this country, you can't be arrested for things the state makes up.
Okay, so does it have to? So there's laws against, for example, lying to Congress. Fair. So do they have to list out all the possible lies you can tell to Congress in order for it to be legal? So lying to Congress about how much money you have in the bank, lying to Congress about the effects of a law. They have to list out every single specific potential iteration of lying to Congress.
So you're saying, based on the interpretation of the state of Georgia, that they felt Jenna Ellis drafting a letter for Donald Trump was part of a criminal conspiracy. She can be charged for that.
100%. She pled guilty because she is guilty.
So I guess my view is then, if Donald Trump wants to interpret the actions of Mahmoud Khalil as threats to state secrets or state foreign policy, he should be deported.
Wait, but you would condemn things that you feel went beyond the pale, right?
So now you're...
Wait. And people can argue about whether it's legal or illegal, and that's what you're doing right now.
Indeed, I am.
And you're willing to condemn the prosecution of Jenna Ellis, fair?
Yes.
Why aren't you willing to condemn the potential deportation of Mahmoud Khalil?
For the exact reason you have said Jenna Ellis as a lawyer should be charged, is why I'm saying Mahmoud Khalil should be deported.
To test the legality of it because there's
no. Because your arguments aren't based in law. It's your interpretation of what is in your moral worldview.
Well, I mean, it's based on the Supreme Court precedent that you seem to accept that these people have First Amendment rights. If they have First Amendment rights, what kind of First Amendment wouldn't protect someone who has that right from deportation based on protected activities? You seem to grant that they had that right, but now you're saying, I don't really know. They might as well test it.
So my point is the INA says they can have their visas revoked for whatever reason, whenever.
But
right?
Would that include religion-based reasons? And you said...
Doesn't matter.
Oh my gosh, we've been circling around this.
Well, because there's an inherent... you guys
just
know.
Circling around
if Trump said...
carcass. Why? And then you guess that we haven't answered your question.
Yeah.
Which is very, very frustrating because we answer your question over and over and over again. Then you're like, you never answer this question. You keep dodging my questions. 2 seconds after we answer your question, we've said how many times, both of us have taken the position, they have First Amendment rights. They're not the same level as what American citizen rights are, which is one reason, by the way, this couldn't have any impact.
So if they're not the same... Wait, Joe. If they're not the same level, what are they? I mean, Tim is saying that based on anything, they could throw them out. So if Mahmoud Khalil said something like this, I'd like a French toast and some eggs, please.
Right.
And they said, on the basis of that, you're going to be deported from the country. Would the First Amendment protect him in that instance? Yes or no?
I think that would not meet that low threshold that I've said over and over. Facially,
but the INA, Tim said the INA. Wait, Tim said. Tim
gave you his moral perspective.
Do you disagree with it? Wait, do you disagree with him?
Do I agree with him morally or legally?
Legally.
Is the law wrong?
Legally, do you disagree with him?
I think legally you cannot just throw someone out for ordering French bread.
Okay,
so but you cannot say because he ordered French bread, I'm throwing him out.
So why can you say so?
You can do. You can go. Hey, this guy just fucking ordered French bread. You're being deported under Section 221I of the Immigration and Nationality.
But they didn't do that.
No, they literally did.
They didn't do that.
I'm saying they didn't give a reason.
Their reason is Marco Rubio's determination. Marco Rubio's determination is based.
Right, that's my point.
Marco Rubio's,
They didn't give a reason. They cited 221.
No, they did not cite this law. They did not. They cited the basis of deportability. That's INA 237, little a, little I. I think it's sub 4 or something like that. But it's you can go to 237. If you actually read the notice to appear, 222 is not the basis.
234.
It's 237. INA 237, and it starts. Basis of deportable aliens should be the name of the statute. It's a long subsection, but it's in sub A.
237. Okay, hold on. I think it's up here.
It's A4.
A4. 237 A4.
I'm not sure if it's 237.
Where does 237 start? I see 236, and then all of a sudden it says 237. Oh, I see. It's at the bottom. You see how they do that with like one sentence at the bottom, and it makes the whole page 237?
Okay, so now go
A4.
So
we're looking. Look at all these. Wait, there isn't one. Is it A1?
I think it's A1.
Well, I'll just look for deportation.
One because that's
yes.
Inadmissible aliens, present in violation of law, violated non-immigrant status or condition of entry.
I think it's big 4. So
also they accuse them of fraud too.
Correct, but there's no material.
Big 4?
Yeah,
I see.
So
isn't it stupid how they do this?
Yeah, I know. It's below the criminal offenses. It's down in 4 under terrorism and national security.
Yep. Okay.
So under
security and general concerns,
so it's C. It's C1.
C1.
Any alien whose presence or activity in the United States, the Secretary of State has reasonable ground to believe would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States is deportable. So Secretary of State Marco Rubio didn't cite the provision that you cited. He cited 237, 4 CI, and he said in his determination why he's adverse to the interest is because he supports Hamas.
Right.
And Joe seemed to accept that if you ordered French bread, it wouldn't be a basis of removability, presumably because the First Amendment protects resident aliens. Why would it be if you support French bread? It's not a basis of removability. Why would it be if you support Hamas?
No, I think the bare minimum threshold is established that he's legitimately considered a national security threat. That those national security threats are not supposed to be fleshed out before the public. In fact, I think that would be stupid.
Are not supposed to be fleshed out. National security threats are not supposed to be fleshed out before the public. How much you want to bet this guy has lost his shit complaining about like the fucking Patriot Act or FISA courts? So national security stuff is now in the purview of secret courts behind the scenes that are not supposed to be in public view? No shot. I don't believe that.
To believe that a policy is supposed to be fleshed
out. I have a simple question. Do you believe that support of Israel is in alignment with American foreign policy?
It depends who gets to decide, right? I think that support for Israel probably is, yeah.
70 plus years, $250 billion?
Yeah, probably.
Do you believe that the protests are a threat to that American foreign policy?
Yeah, I might.
So...
Well, I don't really think that, but I think it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I just want to be clear. It doesn't matter. It cannot violate the First Amendment. That's what's clear here. I actually don't think that the protests would probably get under that rationale to the extent that they're worried about people being critical of Israel. But it doesn't matter what it says because the First Amendment.
I agree. I think then the way the procedure would go is that we're going to get a Supreme Court hearing on whether it goes one way or the other.
I think he has no chance.
Maybe.
Supreme Court.
I would doubt that.
So I think it's fair to say this.
He has procedural problems first and foremost. He has
procedural
problems first and foremost because you have to exhaust the administrative procedure before he's able to go into federal court. But even beyond that, as I said a while ago, probably an hour ago at this point, we're at a juncture here when it comes to national security that this is the one area that the Supreme Court has refused to intercede on executive exclusive authority, and that's why for you to think that when we're talking about,
but we have to determine you can't just say I don't understand. I feel like when lawyers are get politically bought into a certain thing, they start talking like laymen. Like that's what it feels like. Like Good Logic in this conversation, he feels like a layman to me, right? Like this idea of, well, when it's national security, the president needs to be able to act. Yes, that's true. And we can agree with that, sure. But you understand that the procedure here is important. How do we determine what is national security, right? That's the key thing. Like, should the president be able to have exceptional power during times of great crisis? Probably. He's our commander-in-chief. He's the chief executive. And the Supreme Court has said as much and upheld that pretty consistently throughout the entire history of this country. However, we would agree that the president shouldn't be able to do anything just because he says national emergency or national security reasons, right? Like that's the obvious, like that, but this is like obvious.
About someone whose First Amendment rights are already lessened compared to American citizens. This has no potential ramification on First Amendment rights of any citizens. When we're talking about the fact that he's failed to abide by the same terms that enabled him to obtain a visa, and that he committed fraud in obtaining a green card, which throws into question his entire legitimacy of the green card whatsoever, and would be a basis to exclude him also. So when we're looking at it from that perspective, I think that there is such that I've debated you in the past about what the Supreme Court would do. And I'll tell you right now, I was correct last time.
Again, I don't know how many other ways I can say this or how many analogies I could give. Like, imagine your what do most of you guys do programming? Like, imagine you have a program and you're trying to make something work, and you haven't called like the proper library or whatever to load whatever you need to make some particular program run, and somebody goes to you and they're like, hey, your shit's not working, and you're like, well, I don't know why, like all of this code is present, and it's like, yeah, but you haven't like called the library, you haven't actually entered this, it's not being used right now. It's like, okay, so what, it exists over there, right? So it should be fine, right? Like obviously not. You would have to make a call to it, you have to incorporate it into the project somehow, you have to make a call to it somehow. You can't just say that because this evidence exists somewhere in the universe that we're allowed to consider every single thing for the purposes of deporting this guy. It has to be submitted to the proper forum so that it can be analyzed by the proper forum, so that it can be used to make a determination in that forum. Like this applies. This applies across all domains to any. You can make an example out of any. It's just so stupid. Like
I'm on the 14th Amendment issue, and I told you it would be 7-2, if not 8-1, that Trump would win on the 14th Amendment issue.
I predicted he would lose too.
You thought he would lose?
Sorry. I predicted.
We're talking about his eligibility to run.
I predicted Trump. Wait, I predicted Trump would win too.
No,
I did predict it.
Pisco absolutely predicted it. We argued this on my stream, or not argued it, but we talked about it on my stream so much. Pisco absolutely said that Trump's probably going to win this case, but it would be a mistake for him to win it. I'm almost. Pisco was here talking about it so much. And that was a bullshit ass fucking case. He's talking about the Colorado Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court decided that the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was very inconvenient because it would probably prohibit Trump from running for president.
No, I have a clip of me saying he's going to lose or he's going to win.
And I told you it would be 6-3. I said it would not be merely 6-3. I said even the liberal justices will recognize that this is so far out of bounds.
I thought there would be
it's going to be at least 7-2, if not 8-1, and it ended up being 9-0. And I'm telling you now,
it probably was going to be 6-3, I think. But according to the PDF of the ruling that released, it looked like it was going to be 6-3 with 3 dissentings, I think. But then when it got released, it ended up being 9-0. And they talked about how the writings of the court shouldn't be turning up the temperature on the discourse or whatever bullshit. But whatever.
Now, Mahmoud Khalil is not going to win at the Supreme Court level. I'm telling you right, there's no chance that he does, because this is the one area where the executive authority is at its highest, and unless you can show that they specifically hated this guy for one reason that had nothing to do with his speech,
obviously did.
Because that on this one is the one that he
obviously
that
did.
Muslim, that because he's a Muslim, they're getting rid of him. In that case, they're not.
No one believes this shit, by the way. The normal, you realize how out of touch you sound to normal Americans. Everyone understands that the reason they're going after these people is because they don't like his speech, and that's the rationale they gave. You look at Marco Rubio, says his support for
not
Hamas.
liking his speech affects foreign policy and national security, which is the whole point of that's granted.
Has to be viewpoint neutral. Has to be viewpoint neutral, or it's a First Amendment violation.
It's an executive branch.
I want to add the speech is particularly that it's anti-Israel, that it's critical of Israel, and I think the reason why I would agree with you on the court siding with the Trump administration over Mahmoud Khalil is for 2 reasons. The Supreme Court tends to be deferential on issues of national security, so even if there's rights, they allow for Barack Obama to pass the indefinite detention provision, things in the Patriot Act, torture of foreign nationals. Barack Obama murdered American citizens, multiple, I think, 4 or 5 individuals. So when it comes to the Trump administration saying, we want to support Israel, this guy came to our country and he's rallying people against Israel, it's bad for foreign policy, I imagine the Supreme Court's going to go, well, we don't care about rights when it comes to foreign policy. Then you have the issue of American support for Israel is very high. And so even if there was a principled issue of this person has a right to speech, everyone's going to be like, don't care, we like Israel.
But I'm not trying to pull the nation here, Tim. I'm not trying to read tea leaves about the Supreme Court.
I get it. I'm saying that the American
I'm trying
people
to push you guys, and the reason I'm trying to push you guys is because
you are.
you both have
because if he was Tommy Robinson expressing racist views, if you would not be coming here screaming about his rights.
100%.
I can't even believe that he would make that of the pisser, of the grand pisser himself. The idea that Pisco wouldn't be out here, okay, Merrick Garland's #1 fucking defender, he's trying to say, oh, Pisco wouldn't be considered. Bullshit. That is such an unbelievably stupid fucking thing to say about Pisco of all people. Come on, give me a break. Good Logic is hardcore projecting his own inconsistencies here.
100% I would. By the way, I condemned a lot of these protests. I call them insurrections, some of them. Just to be clear about my consistency there, I generally have not seen as like a crazy person on this issue. I'm calling balls and shots, and I'm pushing you guys. I'm pushing you guys because I know if someone came up with a rationale, Johnny-come-lately rationale that said something like, we believe having Muslims in this country at all is a bad for our foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel. Israel wants us to have Muslims be out of this country. They want us to push them out. And so we're going to deport all these aliens because we can, and it's our foreign policy determination. I think that wouldn't you stand up and say that's wrong? Wouldn't you? Would you stand here and be like, well, the Supreme Court often defers to the Secretary of State's determinations about who is and who's not a threat? And so because the Secretary of State said the Muslims are all threats.
But hold on, you're combining a moral question with a legal question. So let's just
on the law.
Make them distinct.
Wait, real quick. What shortcut can I use to take the ice in here and like add it to the ice here? I know there's a way. Oh, fuck. Like I just right-clicked and removed it. I know there's some way to do this. Is it just Q-click? No.
On the law. So on the law, when you come and say this is clearly illegal, of course the Supreme Court should not
In a scenario that what? Give me one time.
In the scenario where the Secretary of State says it's in the foreign policy interest of the United States not to have Muslim aliens in this country.
Control.
And that determination is made based on our long friendship with Israel and our long relationship with Israel, and they don't want it there, and we don't want to undermine that relationship.
Do you need to write these 4 words down? Facially legitimate and bona fide. It's actually 5 words technically. Do you need to write them down?
So I just want to be...
Because every time you keep making this crazy, this extreme hypothetical of banning all Muslims, and I keep coming back to you and saying, I've never taken that position. I don't know anyone.
I gave you that citation.
Trump has never taken that position.
Trump had taken that position. Trump literally ran for president. Don't let Republicans... Dude, conservatives will gaslight you so much on this. What the hell is going on? We need to ban all Muslims.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Don't ever let they gaslight you on everything. They gaslight you on shit that is on video. They gaslight you so much on this shit.
Ridiculous hypothetical, and then I come back to you and I say, why are you giving me this hypothetical?
That citation is from Kleindienst versus Mendel. That language comes from Kleindienst versus Mendel, as cited in Trump versus United States.
1972.
Trump versus Hawaii, in the section on the Establishment Clause. So, but that had to do with an admission decision. We're not talking about admission decisions.
And then after that, the Supreme Court has said that you have to abide by the same terms while you're here that you do for admission. Think of it like this. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask you this question because you keep talking and trying to frame this as a First Amendment right. It's not at all a First Amendment issue because from the perspective of the Supreme Court that you're stuck to the same standard. And when you know that to get in here, you can't be expressing terrorist supportive perspectives. You cannot do.
You don't have. Oh my God! I just fucking accidentally rewound. God damn it! I pushed one. When you're coming into this country, you have no rights. You're not an American citizen. You're applying from outside. Swedish people in Sweden don't have a right, don't have any constitutional rights in the United States of America. Russian people in Russia, British people in Britain. Once you are a lawful permanent resident, once you have a visa, now you're subject to the U.S. jurisdiction. Now your rights have expanded. They've changed. You're recognized by the U.S. government. It's not the same as somebody applying to get in versus somebody who is in and is already accepted.
Across the country where they violate every law with gay sex in public. I'm not trying to be crude, but they do. Then,
cases for military.
Foreign activity, got injured and got in trouble for.
Specifically set forth in the 14th Amendment that you'll have those amendment right. It's not at all a First Amendment issue because from the perspective of the Supreme Court that you're stuck to the same standard. And when you know that to get in here, you can't be expressing terrorist supportive perspectives. You cannot do that when you're trying to get in here. Do you agree with that part? Let's start with this premise. I'm going to go step by step. Do you think that the United States of America has a right to keep people out for saying, you know what, you express terrorist activity, support for terrorism. We're not under
binding.
Do they have a right to
under binding precedent of the Supreme Court because there's a distinction between admission decisions and non-admission decisions. Whether I'm telling you what the law says, and what the law says is you can ban people from the country if they're Chinese. If they're Asian.
That is not the law any longer.
When has it been overturned? When has Xi Jinping been overturned?
I don't know.
It has not been overturned.
You're quoting a case, and when you...
It's a famous case, the Chinese exclusion cases. The first immigration laws on the books. They said you could ban Chinese people from entering the country. Look it up. So I'm acknowledging the reality that the courts treat admission decisions very differently. And so I acknowledge that, whether I agree or not.
So you're recognizing that they can keep someone out on that basis. Now the Supreme Court has also said that you're kept to the same standard while you're here. If you're kept to the same standard while you're here, that means you could be deported.
So that is not the case. And there are different rights at admission versus when you're in the country. For example, you have no procedural due process rights when you're outside of the country seeking admission.
Yeah,
agreed?
Correct.
You do have procedural due process rights when you're in the country and they're trying to force you out.
Specifically set forth in the 14th Amendment that you'll have those due process rights, as Tim read 45 minutes ago.
Wait a second. The 14th Amendment says that states shall not deprive individuals due process.
The point is that Congress has and through counsel.
Can you give a rundown on why the U.S. is so aligned with Israel or vice versa? I think that during the I actually haven't read the history from the U.S. side, but from what I understand of Israeli history, I think that during the Cold War, when the United States is kind of searching for allies around the world or people that are aligned with U.S. interest, Israel in the 70s was just an obvious answer for the United States as being the country most easily aligned with kind of like Western democratic values to get a foothold in the Middle East. Because a lot of countries, or actually a lot of countries, the Soviet Union had been trying to gain a foothold in the Middle East as well. And so the United States, right? And Britain had a foothold, obviously, right? We deposed the Shah during the Iranian Revolution because of Britain's issues with them trying to take over. I think what was it, BP or whatever the British oil company was. You had you had Soviet invasions into Afghanistan. You have the United States. Like both sides are just trying to gain as much of a foothold as they can. So appealing to Israel was, and then working with Israel was the U.S. foothold into the Middle East.
Constitutional amendment even has recognized that when it comes to due process specifically, we're going to confer upon non-citizens that express protection.
You put stuff in the ghost cursor.
Also said that about the First Amendment, but
that's not Congress. That's not Congress saying that. That's the court interpreting it.
The courts have said the same thing about the First Amendment. Right. No, stop. What kind of First Amendment would protect the speech of someone saying, I want French bread? And you said they can't deport based on that. You said that. You said those words. What kind of First Amendment?
I'm not embarrassed.
I know. So what kind of First Amendment, where at its maximum it's protecting political speech, would protect that kind of speech, but not core political speach? What are you talking about? What First Amendment is that?
You want a moral perspective?
No, from a legal perspective.
From a legal perspective, I'm walking you through it. How can you ever can a person contract away their rights to free speech?
Yes.
And they.
Wait, the other fundamental rights.
Let's say a person is charged. Let's say a person is charged with some sort of crime, and they end up pleading out, and they say, you know what? The DA says, I want you to promise that for the next 5 years, you're not going to drink any alcohol. You're not going to meet with this person. You're not going to go to any of these meetings where they have lots of drinking.
Yeah, you can limit his right to assembly. You can waive certain rights.
Oh, okay, and he can waive his right to free speech.
That's not what
inherent in coming in here and signing visa thing and filling out and saying, I'm not a terrorist and I don't support.
Where do you waive your First Amendment rights on your visa?
When the fuck do you do that? What? That's never part of the green card process, is waiving your First Amendment. I don't remember that. Maybe I wasn't in that meeting. Maybe there's a secret one that Melina went to where it's like, oh, just, you know, Stephen, by the way, I waived my First Amendment rights to get my green card. What?
Inherent in that is a right for them to pull you out of this country.
Oh, inherent. Oh, so they don't waive the right. It's inherent in it, aka bullshit.
If in fact you change that position, it could either you lied when you got in here or you changed the position and now.
So could you waive away? Wait. So I'll ask you. So could you waive away your right to protection against torture?
Do you know that?
Answer that. Could you waive that right away?
Yeah.
The government say, as a condition of your green card, you accept that if we want to torture you, you get tortured.
I don't know.
Could they say
Why
that?
Are you going to a different
Because I'm asking if you're consistent.
Because I don't know. I'm sitting here and trying to figure out, as Tim pointed out earlier, when it comes specifically to cruel and unusual punishment, it's difficult to say that's a very subjective perspective. So you're asking me, can he agree?
Could the government say something like,
no. I'll ask you right now. Is it legal for you to make a contract that you'll let Tim cut your finger off? Is it okay for you to actually make a contract that you'll let Tim cut your finger off if he gives you $1 million? Is that legal?
I think it would be legal for the government to regulate that for sure.
Okay.
I think
illegal to regulate.
I think it would be legal for the government to regulate that conduct as between private parties. But this is different, right? We're talking about the government as a condition of your green card saying you sign away all due process. As a condition, you sign away your right against torture. You sign away your right against unreasonable search and seizures. You think the government could do that and go, every one of your rights, and you can just sign?
They can.
They can. You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a fact.
I don't know. Why is that a fact?
People enlist in the military all the time, and they waive their rights.
They don't waive their fundamental rights as Americans. You think you could do that?
So my understanding is that
every time you sign an arbitration clause, you're signing away your right to due process.
But my understanding is
you're signing that. That is, I actually don't know the answer to this, because there's some things you can sign and there's some things you can't. So for instance, you could waive like this. I'm thinking the most extreme example is I think you can sign a thing saying somebody could murder you and they're indemnified from it. Because I'm thinking of if you do fights like boxing or UFC or MMA, there are indemnification clauses. I'm almost positive that you can sign there that as part of the fight, if somebody dies, the boxer isn't charged as a murderer, right? But I don't think you can sign. I don't think you can sign away everything, and that has to be in the context, I think, of like a sporting event or something, right? Like I don't think you can sign a contract saying like I'm going to be this person's slave for 6 months no matter what, and there's no way for me to escape this contract. I don't know what the line is there. I don't know what the line is there, but I know there must be one. I would imagine.
Is that for a lot of people who join the military, for instance, they're subject to laws that that your freedom of movement is gone. You are legally not required to be in certain places.
As a condition of employment.
No, you can get in trouble. Like you can get in maybe, but I could be totally wrong about this. But I've heard stories from my veteran friends that they engaged in a sporting activity, got injured, and got in trouble for it. Not like they went to jail, but it was considered damage to government property or something.
I think instances of military and in certain cases of
also, you got to be so careful when you're talking about military stuff here. One, military has due process. There are military courts for things. But then two, you have to be mindful that there's a difference between like getting fired versus having criminal charges. These are different things as well. Okay. Destiny, for instance, you can't legislate away rent control in San Francisco. No matter what you put in a lease, rent control still takes priority. I'm sure because the law would supersede it there. Yeah, but there are some things that you can. I'm trying to figure out like why for boxing and stuff can you basically sign away your right to, your right to life, like somebody can murder you. I'm sure there's a legal precedent or carve-outs or something. I just don't know I don't know the framework for any of that. I don't think you can even directly sign your life away. Pretty sure assisted suicide isn't legal in any state. Oh, see, like that's a good question. Let's say that I wanted to do assisted suicide, but I'm not allowed to in my state. Couldn't you just have like a 90-year-old with cancer like sign up to do a boxing match where they sign an indemnification clause and then the boxer just kills? I'm sorry.
Employment that makes sense. So there could be some areas why there's exceptions.
You're not allowed to.
Wait, Plastic Jesus says the indemnification is not to indemnify against murder. It's to clarify that you are knowingly taking part in a dangerous activity and stipulating to the fact that the mens rea does not exist. Okay, maybe that, sure. And actually, that makes sense what Plastic Jesus is saying, because like if somebody was in a boxing match and a dude like punched the fuck out of you and you like go down and the guy sees you on the ground, he's like oh, like killing. He's like, oh, and he's like, I'm fucking murdering. I'm gonna kill you. I'm murdering you. And he actually like murders a guy. You probably can be charged with murder in that circumstance, I would imagine, huh?
There's exceptions to everything, but here what we're talking about, like
there are.
Like,
You can't sometimes sign away your rights.
Sign away your rights for as a condition of employment, perhaps, but not as a condition for just, as a member of the community that the country has deemed you fit to enter the country as a permanent resident. And think about this even more specifically.
Which that never really happened.
Think about it more specifically. Under your waiver theory, I want to analyze your waiver theory about how shocking it is. Under your waiver theory, could the government condition social security checks on you waiving away all your rights? Could they condition welfare on
how many different hypotheticals?
You can't knowingly kill someone. It's more about if a civil suit was brought against them. Sure, but there has to be some part of signing that contract or being in that event has to also, I don't want to say indemnify you from criminal activity, but make it incredibly unlikely to impossible. Otherwise, nobody would fight professionally, right? Because, like, imagine the government comes in at some point, like, you know what? You guys all kind of look like you're assaulting each other. I'm about to charge every motherfucker in here, right? That's some Denzel Washington training day shit, right? Like,
are you going to ask me about? Because I don't know, where's the relevance to talking about Social Security when we're having a discussion about the right of the government to deport illegal aliens?
You said that right is so ephemeral, right? That right, you said that that people have First Amendment rights, that resident aliens have First Amendment rights, but that right is so ephemeral that it could be waived away as a condition of entering the country at all.
I think your First Amendment rights could in theory be waived away even if you're an American citizen. All the
even
more
for
so
getting Social Security checks, even for getting any government benefit at all.
It's such a random and ridiculous perspective.
Why don't you answer it then?
It just drives me crazy. You're a lawyer, right? You take the LSAT, which is a whole bunch of like logic testing. That's all the LSAT really is. It's not legal knowledge, just logic testing, right? And then you go to law school and doing hypotheticals and doing contract negotiations is all about hypotheticals and reading prior case law. Like, I don't understand how some people go through the rigmarole of all that and then come out and they're like, whoa, that's a ridiculous hypothetical. You're literally a lawyer. Your like job is hypotheticals almost to some extent. Like, this is like your job. What do you mean you can't consider a hypothetical? If any profession in the world should be to consider hypotheticals, it should be your profession. What the fuck?
Security checks, even for getting any government benefit at all?
It's such a random and ridiculous perspective.
Why don't you answer it then?
I don't, because I don't know. I don't know the answer to a question as far as, wait, what do I know? Don't tell me what I know. I'm telling you I don't know. Are you calling me?
You fucking know this. This is garbage.
Like, yeah, is the bar exam, is it written stuff or is it just multiple choice? I imagine it's probably a lot of written, huh? Like, imagine on every written thing for the bar exam, you're like, can't consider is hypothetical, can't consider is hypothetical, won't refuse to consider silly, wacky hypothetical. Like, do you pass if you do that?
I can't waive away social security.
I don't, no. So real quick, if someone were enlisted and they organized a protest, I'm trying to use this specifically as Mahmoud Khalil, it is a criminal offense. So you can actually sign away your right to engage in protest.
As a condition of employment in the military.
It's not employment.
Yeah, you're subject to military code. Listen, there can be specific cases for military.
But even for that military stuff, there's a name for this. I don't remember, but there's a name in the military where you're not supposed to show any political partisanship. There's a name for this. Everybody in chat has probably heard this. We all heard this before. But I don't know if that subjects you to criminal penalties or if you can just be like dishonorably discharged or whatever. I don't know if dishonorable discharge carries criminal penalty. I don't think it does, right? Remember, there's a difference between being fired versus you committing a crime and having your like deprivation of liberty, you know?
I mean, but real quick, you're arguing the government can. So if I were to go to Best Buy and they said, so long as you're an employee here, we expect you not to protest. That's a contract condition of employment, and it makes sense. Like the Snow White controversy, the producer's son went and reprimanded Rachel Zegler. But to go to the government and they'll say, no, we won't just fire you. We will put you in prison if you speak out against.
So difference is based on.
Is that okay? What is that? Now I need to. Law against political partisanship in military. As a veteran, any rights can technically be signed away in contracts, but the question is whether or not that contract is legally viable. If challenged, in almost all cases, there are limits. There's a name for this, like an act or a law or a thing or whatever. I thought. Fuck. Or maybe there's not a specific name for it. The Hatch Act is for government employees. You're not even supposed to wear your military uniform when attending political events. Applies to all American armed forces. I'm trying to think, what is the penalty for... Penalty for political partisanship while in military... Military members and federal employees who violate the Hatch Act are subject to a range of disciplinary actions, including removal or debarment from service, reduction in grade, suspension, a letter of reprimand, or a fine of up to $1,000. Okay. So this sounds like, so that at most, is that fine, is that a civil penalty or a criminal penalty? So you wouldn't be thrown in jail for this. It sounds like it, right?
But to go to the government and they'll say, no, we won't just fire you. We will put you in prison if you speak out against us.
So differences based on private versus public, just to be clear. So New York City human rights law that you said before actually does protect certain kinds of expressions and off-job political activity. So some states do impose those statutory frameworks that protect that kind of activity. And I think that you probably agree with a lot of those laws that say that, for example, you can't be fired if you're a Republican. Some people have...
Only in D.C.
Only in D.C.
No, I think it's only in D.C., actually. Yeah.
Okay. But regardless, like we're talking about private, usually the Bill of Rights does not apply as to private actors. And so we're engaging in First Amendment analysis for people who you acknowledge have these rights. And what you're suggesting is beyond military, which can be a category of its own, and fine. I'll even accept that it's a category of its own because military is so particular or something. What you're suggesting is that even American citizens can be deprived of their rights by the government just choosing to condition certain benefits on that. And that is what I mean when I say these are our rights. When you accept certain frameworks such as his, I want to finish my statement. When you accept this framework of wide-reaching waiver, or when you say rights don't really matter that much because they're just going to be interpreted, you are signing away your own rights, not just those rights.
I'm not at all. That's a real slippery slope that I'm talking about the rights that attach to a foreign national or a foreign visitor or someone holding a green card to an American citizen. When over and over again, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go finish.
When you're trying to engage in fear porn of trying to say if we limit his rights, which the Supreme Court has already limited his rights, and saying he doesn't have the same level of rights, and that's somehow some threat to American democracy,
saying that, but I don't know how
First Amendment rights are going to be taken away. That is utter hogwash, and you know it is.
I just think it's also silly. Literally nobody cares about anyone's constitutional rights. If I want to go buy a gun, I have to waive my right against self-incrimination. The government has a requirement unto me that I waive my right. And poor Hunter Biden actually faced criminal charges because he did not want to self-incriminate as an illegal drug user, which he has no obligation to do. And I actually said, I hope he wins. I hope he challenges the Supreme Court. Do not pardon him. I want him to go to the Supreme Court and say, the government has no right to, as a condition of my right.
That's kind of shocking. Good for Tim. I wonder if Tim's going to make a turn, or he maybe's been consistent on these. Any Republican that feels strongly about firearms issues should have abhorred the Hunter Biden conviction. The idea that the government can look at a memoir that somebody's written or looked at a video and saw that you've used a drug and then know that you own firearms and say, therefore, you violated there's a form that you fill out called a 4473 where you say that you're not an unlawful user of a drug, whatever the fuck that even means, by the way. That's not even well defined. What does unlawful user mean? You've never used it. You're not currently using it. You're not high when you're filling it out. No one knows what that means. Any Second Amendment loving American should be like, what is this? This is kind of weird, no? It is wild that that's what Republicans went with.
To keep and bear arms to self-incriminate. Violation of the Fifth Amendment to enforce it, so that I can enjoy my second. Instead, they always do this. The courts say, or the government says, let's not let that one get to precedent because then it'll actually screw over the abuses that we have. But tell me, where is anyone ever to point out the conditions set upon all the time on all of the Bill of Rights from left and right? It's literally everybody just arguing one thing. Might makes right. That's all they're arguing.
I don't believe that's what they're arguing. I appreciate the passion.
Liberals are saying, we think Jen Ellis committed a crime. The right is saying she was just providing legal advice. Your interpretation determines whether or not a lawyer goes to prison and whether or not someone will actually seek legal counsel, or lawyers will be terrified because they're like, if I try and actually assist a politician in this case, they're going to accuse me of a crime. Yep. It happens every day that someone's going to say, in 1948, the government said it's this, therefore it's so. And then what's going to happen is they're going to get sued. The new Supreme Court's going to say, actually, we're erasing that and changing the precedent. So all that's really
happening. You're not supposed to. He should bring up the stare decisis here. It is important. There's a reason why you're not supposed to do this, right? Because if it was the case, then actually everything Tim is saying would be true. Nobody would have any trust in the courts or any trust in the rule of law because stuff would be changing so often. This is why it's important to follow prior precedents or how common law systems develop or whatever, is that you follow like the rulings that have been made over a long period of time in ordinary time by sober judges, et cetera.
Happening is people are playing this funny word game of I can make it sound like I'm right and you're wrong. And then this is where we're at. If you look at all of the Bill of Rights and you look at everything you're arguing, I can point to 50 for every amendment and be like, here's where the liberals have argued for and against the First Amendment. They think it's right when they do it this way and wrong when they do it. Here's where the conservatives do it. All that's really happening is, can you win an election? And what it really boils down to is how many sad moms can we show on TV? And is the economy good or bad? Then we'll get power to enforce.
I don't believe it's nihilism. I don't believe it because
it's not nihilism.
No, it's a kind of form of nihilism. It's not. These rights have no purchase. They're not. And in some sense, I agree in the sense that rights are what humans invent them, and they mean different things to different people. Absolutely, people have different interpretations. But your interpretation of the Second Amendment has purchase on you. I just saw you get very fiery and passionate about an issue that you care a lot about.
It's not Second Amendment. It's when you said, can the government condition you to waive your rights? They've done it on the Nix form. It's not a question of gun rights. It's the existence of a form that says, if you want to exercise your right, waive your Fifth Amendment.
But the scope
exists right now and is protected by Democrats.
So I want to be clear. the scope of a right is always going to be subject to interpretation. You're right about that. And the First Amendment has never been thought of to be this thing, anything anyone ever says. So, for example, incitement is not protected.
Yep.
Child pornography is not protected. Obscenity is not protected.
Obscenity,
these are well-known
obscenity,
exceptions to the First Amendment. There are doctrines, for example.
Obscenity is not protected.
It's still not protected.
Now protected.
No, it's not. Obscenity is a category of unprotected speech. Now,
so the issue is now we're dealing with obscenity as like a blue law in that no one.
Careful, fuck. Pisco's using a legal term. Obscenity is a legal distinction. If something has been decided as obscene, then by definition it's not protected. That's what obscene means. Tim Pool probably doesn't know this. He should clarify.
It's enforcing against it.
Now, yes and no. A lot of people aren't enforcing against obscenity, but also obscenity itself is dependent on certain artistic value and national standards. Very.
Let me. This is actually another good point of the question of rights. There are a lot of laws in the books we never enforce anymore.
True.
Famously, there was this story about skydiving on Sunday was illegal for women in Florida, and they say it's not true. But there are a lot of laws like this. There's a book called Funny Old Laws. There was a law, I think it was in Boston, that you can't cool pies on your windowsill, and everybody laughs at it. But the reason why is because back when it was a very small community, cooling pies on your windowsill attracted animals and then caused problems. They said stop doing this. They had laws saying you can't take baths on Tuesday because the aquifer was strained. We don't enforce any of those laws anymore. They're still on the books. So we exist in a society where it really is the whim of law enforcement and the body politic. For example, in a much better example, in San Francisco, 2 men gave each other blowjobs in the middle of the street. This was during Pride, in full view of children and everyone else. And the police said they're allowed to do it. Well, clearly they're not. I mean, it's obscenity laws across the books in every facet ban that. Why don't the police arrest them? Because all that really matters is if the public is willing to tolerate and accept it or not. And if the people would this is why we get leftist terrorism. The reason why we see Teslas being firebombed is because what's the end result? You're going to...
Wait, real quick. If you use quality agreements, if you use quality ingredients while crafting other things, does that mean that you have a higher chance of getting a quality thing? Does that make sense?
See, Vancouver, for instance, booted Tesla from their auto show, saying we can't keep it safe anymore. This is the purpose of the might make right ethos, which we see dominant right now. I'm not saying Democrat liberal entirely, I'm saying predominantly far left. They're enacting that, and it is used to amplify their power and the moral worldview they have. Thus,
quality ingredients,
as it pertains to the Columbia protests, what do we see? Organizers put together these protests. Whether you want to blame them for it, physical occupation occurred, physical violence against Jews occurred, buildings were taken over, faculty complained of physical threats and violence against them. You know, I look at this and I'm just like, how do we prevent things like this from happening? Well, we've got people having sex in the street in San Francisco and the police won't enforce it. We have buildings being taken over and it's allowed to happen for an extended period of time. Donald Trump says the guy who helped organize this is getting kicked out of the country, and every legal liberal comes out and says we cannot allow that to happen. These things are all interconnected. And so the question really becomes, are you willing to enforce against things that cause damage to your moral worldview? The right tends not to. They're starting to now. The left is resistant to it. So that's my point on all of this. Say whatever you want about whatever you want. So long as you've got pride events across the country where they violate every law with gay sex in public, I'm not trying to be crude, but they do, then I'm going to sit here and be like, guys, you had a violent protest, Jews got attacked, buildings got taken over, you've got no moral ground to stand on, you're trying to cite precedent to win political power.
It's what they said about communists. It's what they said about Jan Sixers. It's what they say about all the people that the public hates. You know, the public hates Tren Aragua.
Did Donald Trump... You brought up Jan 6. Did the Republicans have a committee for May 29th? Did they go and set a national commission to go and hunt down...
Why did Trump say it was no big deal then?
What, May 29th?
Yeah, why did he say no big deal?
He's got an ego problem.
Okay, so he lied. Did Trump lie, yes or no?
No.
Well, you just said it was a big deal.
You're asking me if Trump's opinion is a correct statement?
Was it correct? Is he lying about his actual opinion? Does Trump think it was a big deal?
I think Trump thinks it's not a big deal.
Okay, so...
Like I said, Republicans don't enforce it.
Is Trump wrong about whether it was a big deal or not?
100%.
Okay, so was his life in danger?
Absolutely it was.
Okay.
That's why they brought him into a bunker.
So he's deluded for thinking that it wasn't in danger.
Absolutely. The dude has got an ego problem. Okay. He doesn't want to be bunker boy. They brought him into an emergency bunker because 1,000+ far leftists tore the barricades and were throwing firebombs at the White House. And we never got any account of
they were throwing firebombs at the White House right now.
Okay, let me pull up the picture. Yep. Do you know about St. John's Church, right?
Oh, yeah. This view, while you look it up, this view about rights and that it's all whatever because the gays are doing this, the left is doing this, it's all bullshit. You guys don't believe it. There are some values you guys have. No, you guys actually, I believe that you're supposed to have values, right? You have values. These rights have purchase on. You're not just going to say that only the people that I like get the rights. Is that the White House?
You're asking me if one photo from an entire article, as I'm seeking to pull up the photos, you've asked me if one image of a Lafayette building being torched by arsonists during the...
You made a specific claim, didn't you?
Would you like me to pull up the photo of the guard post in the White House grounds being set on fire?
White House grounds?
Those are videos that purport to be a guard station, but you said that they were throwing Molotov cocktails at the White House. You did say that, right?
The White House includes the grounds and the guard post?
Oh, so torching this would include throwing it at the White House, right?
What?
Remember, this is so funny. God, if Pisco brings this up, I'll donate $100 million for stream. So, the White House... Wait, is this the thing? Is anything I'm thinking of? Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. So he said the White House, and that includes everything in the White House grounds. Okay, so he's going to say that if a building gets torched or whatever, or gets thrown out on the White House grounds, all of that counts as the White House or whatever. Do you think that Tim Pool would make that same concession about being on the Capitol grounds? Because I feel like I've heard, if not Tim Pool, other people argue those people weren't in the Capitol building; they were just on the grounds, right? Notice how, when it comes to a side he doesn't like, even attacking anything on the White House grounds is basically an attack on the White House. But for J6, well, if they didn't go in the actual building, well, what about the Capitol grounds? They were barricaded off. You know that, right? They were barricaded off until the Proud Boys broke through 3 different barricades to get into the restricted area, right?
We're torching this building in Lafayette Square.
The Lafayette Square maintenance building?
Yeah, so we're torching this building.
I'm specifically referring to them throwing a firebomb at the White House grounds. Here you go.
So they weren't throwing at the White House building or fence, fair?
No, what do you...
But you said they were throwing firebombs.
Stop playing semantic games. So let's clarify.
You're representing that they were attacking the White House itself
did,
with
yes.
firebombs, and now you're pointing to a maintenance station. That was burned
You
down.
are pointing to a maintenance station.
Well, where's
I'm
the evidence of attacking the White House?
Did the guard post get set on fire?
It wasn't a guard post, it was a maintenance station. That's what it says.
Whoa.
There's one Twitter account.
You're playing games. You're playing games.
So you didn't
We're not. You did not come prepared.
Yeah, I did.
So you asked me to pull up a photo. As I'm scrolling through an article, you asked me to stop and address an image you decided upon, and then you said, "Aha, that proves it."
Show the guard post.
I'll pull it up.
Yeah, it's one tweet, one guy that says a guard post is burned down. There's no. So have you read the report?
Tim doesn't read reports.
Post that says that it was a maintenance.
No.
What's about flailing? Have you read the Department
Changing the
report?
subject.
No, the report about May 29th and May 30th. Have you read the report about it?
Did you see?
Have you read the report about it?
You're flailing.
Have you read the report about May 29th,
No.
May 30th
Tim
protests?
hasn't.
Have you
Tim hasn't read it, and he won't say that because he's seen articles. Tim won't answer that question. He didn't read the report. He obviously didn't read it. Tim doesn't read anything.
Reflecting.
What am I talking about?
Changing the subject.
What subject am I changing?
Let's go back to on May 29th, 1,000 plus far leftists tore the barricades down, injured over 100 law enforcement officers, set fire to St. John's Church, torched several other buildings, flipped over cars.
Who's changing we were talking about whether they had thrown Molotov cocktails at the White House.
You interrupted me as I was addressing May 29th and asked me to pull up the photo, and I said I would do that.
You made a claim. You said they were attacking the White House with Molotov cocktails. You don't have evidence for that, right?
Is there an image of you said you saw an image of the guard post on fire?
What one Twitter account said was a guard post.
I will concede that to you.
Okay.
And this is where I'm headed. Okay. So let's not get carried away on me. I'll say, you know what, you're right. The fire may or may not have happened, but there is a post online that purports a guard post in the White House grounds was set on fire.
Yes.
So let's just, you know what? Okay. They did not firebomb the White House. They may have, we're not entirely sure. They did tear down the barricades, attack law enforcement, 1,000 plus, over 100 law enforcement officers were injured, and they set fire to St. John's Church. They set fire to several buildings outside of the White House complex. And we never got a national commission or a committee from Congress. We did not get national raids in the 1,000 plus. 30 plus people died in those riots. We never got law enforcement for 90 plus days, over 100 days. Far left extremists were lobbing explosives, mortars at federal buildings. They took over.
I'm sorry, I missed it. Did we just expand this conversation to the entirety of the BLM riots? Because there were tons of investigations. There were tons of people. I think over 11,000 arrests over all of that. There were convicted. Like, what did we just? 30 people died. He's talking about the entirety of all the BLM riots across the entire United States now.
Locations in Seattle, Portland, Minnesota, and Atlanta in autonomous zones.
You call them insurrections, fair?
Well, May 29th is insurrection.
Wait. You did call the Black Lives Matter situations insurrections, right?
May 29th.
Or did you?
May 29th.
Yeah.
Pisco should just keep repeating it. I know it feels uncomfortable, but I mean, even I feel uncomfortable doing it. But like the refusal of any of these guys to answer a question, like, just answer it, yes or no. Did they? Yes or no? Hello?
You keep doing that.
Yes.
Okay. I refer to.
Yeah, he keeps doing it because he's trying to get you to actually take an actual position, a solid position on literally anything, instead of just like hopping around because you know you've been caught.
Seattle, Portland, Minnesota, and Atlanta, and then asked me if those were all insurrections.
You said I have the videos of them.
The May 29th insurrection was in front of the White House when they ripped the barricades down and forced the president into a bunker.
Okay, whose fault is it that we don't have a report on that and a committee on that?
Republicans.
Okay, is it also Trump's fault?
Yes.
Okay, and also to be clear, since you said this was an insurrection, you agree Jan 6 was an insurrection, fair?
No.
Why not?
Jan 6 is an insurrection insofar as May 29th is yes.
Okay, do you think May 29th was an insurrection?
No.
What's your definition of insurrection?
So the point being made at the time, in the video you're referencing, is that if the Democrats are going to form a committee, accuse the rioters at the Capitol building of being engaged in insurrection, my response is, okay, then May 29th was also an insurrection.
Tim, you and Dan Bongino, other commentators on the right, I have clips of them, all called the George Floyd situations insurrections. You did, before Jan 6. So using your...
No, we didn't.
Yes, I have the clips.
You're wrong. Completely wrong.
You're on it saying these are insurrections.
No.
All right, I'll produce that for you. And everyone can
Please.
follow. My Twitter account is Pisco Liddy. I'll produce the video of you calling them insurrections. Not only
before January 6th.
Before January 6th. Not only did you do that, you have tweets about it.
You're saying that before January 6th happened, I referred to George Floyd as an insurrection.
Yes, you did. You said insurrection.
Does anybody have a link to the tweets?
With respect to Washington. If you did do that, Tim, wouldn't you be duty bound to also call January 6th insurrection under your then existing standard?
No.
Why not? If you were willing to call it out before Jan 6, why wouldn't you call Jan 6 an insurrection?
We're talking about two different circumstances.
Oh my God.
We're comparing them in your standard for one, where you were before Jan 6 willing to call them insurrectionists.
You're presupposing that I challenge that.
Sorry. If you did call those things insurrections, were you wrong then?
If before January 6th, I referred to people taking over city blocks as insurrections.
Were you wrong to do so?
In the context of January 6th, no.
No. At the time, were you wrong? And
No.
would you disavow your statements?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay. So, given that you assume you did, wouldn't, under the standard that you applied to these individuals in Seattle, Portland, all that situation, wouldn't Jan 6 also be an insurrection under your standard, your pre-Jan 6 standard?
No.
Why? So what's more insurrection about the Portland situation or the courthouse in Portland versus Jan 6?
How long was were the city blocks in various cities occupied?
It depends. It varies.
Several weeks to months.
So it's the length of it? That's length?
Several weeks to months. Where did this happen besides Chaz? Did this happen in any place besides Chaz?
Is the difference in insurrection?
Well, first, you're presupposing that I used the word insurrection.
You did, before assuming that as a predicate.
Right, and I challenge that. It may have been the case, and I would argue this. The term insurrection as applied from January 6 on was very specific. The intention of individuals to stop an official proceeding to keep a president in power. That was the definition of what insurrection was. My argument after that is, if you were going to argue that January 6, which included a large group of rioters and a large group of peaceful protesters all wrapped up in the same thing, then I would argue, let's also get a convention on May 29th. And I met Republicans for continually avoiding it and doing nothing about it.
And Trump
that being said, Trump himself, I think Trump's strategy was let the left burn it down so I can win an election. I think he was wrong to do so. I think he should have invoked the Insurrection Act and crushed these motherfuckers and locked them in prison.
Which act?
Insurrection Act.
Yeah. So, but assuming that you did call it an insurrection beforehand,
perhaps that's what you're confusing.
Yeah. No, I'm not confused about that. So I understand the Insurrection Act could apply to non-insurrections.
I think that's where the confusion.
No, it is not, because I understand those nuances. And listen, when I use the term insurrection, I have these, I'm going to say, very in the weeds debates about the term insurrection and what it means. And so I try to look and use an originalist lens on what insurrection means. But I'm using your standards. I'm using your standards. You called certain Black Lives Matter riots and absolutely out of control. And I also would call some.
Let's clarify that. If insurrection is, as defined by the Insurrection Act, as applied to the BLM riots, it is when local law enforcement is not upholding the law. The president.
Hold on, real quick. This is what Pisco had linked before in his Twitter, like half a year ago.
Attacked. They demanded his resignation, and all he did was make it worse, make everything worse. But I truly believe that's his intent. Take a look at this story from Katu 2. Tear gas deployed, Mayor Wheeler in the middle, fire outside federal courthouse. Okay, I want to read this for you. I also have a thread that shows you, a Twitter thread showing you all that happened with Mayor Ted Wheeler. And I got to tell you, man, the government of Portland has now joined insurrection against the federal government. A lot of people, I see a lot of these lefties getting mad because I'm saying insurgent and insurrection and stuff, but it's difficult to figure out how to describe a group of people that keeps going to the federal courthouse and attacking it. I understand it's not like they're showing up with live ammo or anything, but they're showing up with weapons and explosives. Oof. That's just a reality. Mortar shell explosive, commercial grade fireworks are extremely dangerous. They spray fireballs everywhere. So you can start fires with them, especially if you throw it inside. The feds are defending their courthouse. Now, if you follow most progressives and even the mainstream media, they won't tell you this. They won't show you the photo. Look at this photo right here. What we're seeing is an overhead shot. Here's the street. Here are the people. This is a massive fire covering the entire sidewalk. The fires that are being set are huge. And the feds typically come out, in many videos, you'll see them come out with fire extinguishers to put out fires. And then they push back the crowds. The crowds that attack back and then claim that they are being repressed. Show for their friends incarcerated inside. Fair point, I think. I don't think these fireworks are actually going to cause significant damage to the outside of the building. But what do? The fireworks will cause damage, and the buildings are barricaded. But what do? Sit back? They've breached the courthouse now. So I don't know if he wrote this yesterday, and now they've breached the courthouse. What would you say? Perhaps the reason they started firing at the insurrectionists, whatever you call them, fanatics, was because, not necessarily because of the commercial grade fireworks, but because they were trying to breach the courthouse. There's videos posted by Evans himself and by Andy No and many others going back quite a ways where they're trying to break the barricades down. And there's actually a video of them tearing the wood off of the barricades, protecting the glass. There's a video of them with a fire extinguisher trying to bash the glass. And Evans himself notes this right here. You see, this is, as far as I'm concerned, official government joining in, engaging in the insurrection against, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I now remember exactly what the point I was trying to make.
With the diligent valor?
Yeah, the court documents said that the far left breached the courthouse on July 4th.
Okay.
That these people, insurrectionists, entered federal jurisdiction, and that prompted the deployment of these officers, the federal agents, to go out and start clearing things out.
Right, they weren't there until they broke into the federal building. Right,
the 39th
exactly.
day of writing. Mm-hmm. And so that was the response. If Ted Wheeler stands the police down as police commissioner, which he did, if the AG is suing in defense of the far left, then you have this guy now coming out, the mayor, joining in the riots, lying about it, getting tear gassed, basically assisting.
Okay, so Tim definitely was using insurrection, but okay. Maybe he just forgot all that.
The president has the right to bring in the National Guard to enforce local law.
They don't define insurrection in the Insurrection Act, but there are a lot of circumstances, including what you just outlined.
Let's clarify for the purpose of what we're actually trying to discuss.
Yep.
This word can be applied in different contexts. Mm-hmm. In the context of the BLM riots, were this to be an insurrection, it applies to the Insurrection Act. And the Insurrection Act is when local law enforcement is not enforcing the law, the president has a right to call in the National Guard to enforce local law. I believe that Donald Trump should have invoked the Insurrection Act, and in that context, what they engaged in was insurrection. Local law enforcement was not enforcing the law and was allowing far-left extremists to use violence, firebombs, and physical assault against individuals, government buildings, and otherwise. In the context of January 6th, they said, these are people trying to overthrow the government itself, and that's an insurrection. The argument that... Democrats, the J6 committee. If the argument is that if you want to use the insurrection as defined by the Insurrection Act, and that is DC
doesn't define it.
Exactly. So we can only apply the context of the law does. If Donald Trump were to have called the National Guard on January 6th because he deemed an insurrection happening,
call it insurrection?
In that regard, I would say in that context, yes. So understanding what we're talking about is a core element of what these debates always tend to be. So again, in the context of the Insurrection Act, it specifically refers to when local law enforcement doesn't uphold the law. In reference to January 6th, it is a group of people trying to overthrow the government. And that's how it's applied to the 14th Amendment. So I would not say that the individuals in Portland were trying to overthrow the government necessarily. It's a riot, just like J6 was.
I mean, they established an autonomous zone.
Certainly. And they took over police buildings.
In Oregon, they were trying to tear down the courthouses. And it was in
Certainly.
Wait, and Hassan was at this debate?
Took over police buildings.
In Oregon, they were trying to tear down the courthouses. And it was in Washington that they took over for weeks, and they called it the Chaz, and then the Chaz.
But wait a second, folks. I mean,
and to me, that is
how is it not an insurrection?
That's utterly an insurrection.
Okay.
If you take over a police station, that's an insurrection. If you
take over the police station, it's an insurrection. What about the Capitol?
This guy, dude.
They weren't trying to seize the Capitol.
What were they trying to do? Just murder people inside?
It was like
it has to be a permanent takeover of the police office.
What I'm saying is, when they come marching in there, the same way people in the 6 previous elections, or at least 3 or 4, going back to Gore v. Bush, there have been people who have been coming in there and screamed that they were unhappy with the way things were happening, and were removed by the Capitol Police.
Yeah, so I have a definition of insurrection that would include some things and exclude other things.
It doesn't become insurrection simply because there's thousands of you who are like that individual there. So no, there was no plan. There was no plan that we're taking over the government. There's no plan that we're gonna.
There was literally a plan. It was literally spelled out in documents. There was literally seditious conspiracy convictions over it. So he's literally lying. But
we're gonna remove Mike Pence. There was no plan like that.
I dispute that. But I think we should step back, because I know it's fun to talk about the term insurrection, but really what Tim is getting at is what his perceived inconsistency on the left wing and the right wing with respect to rights. So what we're here about is rights, and I don't think, and I think that you agree, that rights mean more to you than just what the majority of the population thinks.
I disagree with his assessment.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think that it's like, if I'm sitting here, I'm like, now because I'm in power, I want to have more of this. I do everything I can to remain as consistent as possible. There are times that I've seen Trump do things that I say, this is wrong. He did one of this week he endorsed Lindsey Graham as senator. To me, that should have been a violation of his First Amendment rights right there, just uttering that phrase. So yeah,
Lindsey Graham's pretty pro-Israel.
I don't care. See, what are you racist? You assume because I'm Jewish.
I know that
because I'm Jewish that I must be pro-Israel.
Oh, now you guys
have you heard me express that? No, why would you assume?
You say you're very pro-Israel.
I know. Actually, what I'm saying is, you're just coming out there and saying because someone is pro-Israel, that means I
didn't say that because
some.
Oh no, that's tongue in cheek. Don't act offended.
No, what I'm saying is, you're just drawing these conclusions.
No one's drawing conclusions.
Left in general, I've never been racist enough to be a Democrat.
Let's try this. Let's just try this. How do we reconcile that problem I already mentioned? That the NICS forms requires you to waive your Fifth Amendment rights.
For the military.
No. This is anyone in the United States who wants to buy a gun must waive their Fifth Amendment rights in order to exercise their second.
Yeah, so what the court tells us to look at, because I'm going to take the Supreme Court and their precedent, it says you look at the time of the founding and the enactment of the Second Amendment, what were the kinds of regulations that were in place there that the framers would have considered part of their Second Amendment rights. No one thinks that these rights are absolute in all circumstances. For example, no one thinks that the Second Amendment prevents us from having laws that prevent access to felons, or prevent laws that prevent access of guns to the mentally incompetent. These are well-established.
I disagree. I think they protect that.
So you think that felons and mentally
okay
incompetent people have a right to possess weapons?
Under the Second Amendment, yes. Because it clearly states the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't say unless we at some point deem them to be. Now, to be fair, there is the argument of due process. The reason why felons can have guns is because the Constitution guarantees due process. All rights can be curtailed following due process.
So you think that felons should have the right to have guns, but that green card holders don't have the right to speak? I mean,
no, I just literally said due process can strip you of your rights. You can have your right to freedom of movement, freedom of speech, everything curtailed if you are in violation of law. In fact, you can be enslaved. The 13th Amendment explicitly allows you to be a slave if you jaywalk. I'm not kidding.
I know. Yeah, pull it up.
The 13th Amendment says any crime. It doesn't specify felonies or misdemeanors, meaning you can commit a petty offense by not returning a library book, and that gives the government the right to enslave you. Granted, those things don't get enforced that way.
Well, would you consider let me
ask you a question. Do you think that someone who gets a green card should have more rights than a felon?
Depends on.
Because I actually think it's such an immoral position. To me, I look at it as someone coming from the right, and I say to myself, look, the same way I have someone in my house, and if someone's in my house and I invite them into my house, there's an expectation they're going to comport themselves with a certain level of conduct. I came in here before and I said, what is accepted protocol during the show here? Because I'm a visitor here in Tim Pool's studio. If I'm Tim Pool's kid, there's a different standard where even if I violate that, if I violate it here, he's going to throw me out of here. And as you would agree, is his right. If I'm his kid, though, in that case, if his kid is now grows up and is 12 years old, 10 years old, and he says, I'm going to no longer support you any longer, we would say that is something that could be criminal.
Let me give you what you want. I do agree. American citizens have more rights than green card.
Well,
I do agree with that.
Well, thank God we got to that.
But not as so far as the First Amendment.
Right? So I think felons have some rights that green card holders don't have, and I think green card holders have some rights that felons don't have. For example, felons don't necessarily have free speech rights to go and protest and stuff, right? So I think they're not overlapping. But these are ways in which, importantly and critically, green card holders and aliens have different rights. For example, you can't exile a U.S. citizen if they commit a crime. You can.
You should be able to.
You think that you should be able to exile American citizens out?
I would prefer it instead of capital punishment. I think capital punishment is worse than exile. I don't trust the state to kill people. The example I like to
I don't know if it's going to, but the problem is you can't have a country that makes stateless people. It's just a huge clusterfuck for everybody around the world to deal with. It's just nobody wants to deal with stateless people. It's just too much.
Give to conservatives who tend to be pro-death penalty is imagine Kamala Harris pointing at someone saying, trust me, that guy should die. They would never believe it. I would prefer it if when it came to capital offenses, we just said, we're going to put you on a boat and kick you off.
Just be against both. Why can't you can be against both?
What do you do with these people then?
Keep them in prison.
And who's paying for it?
I guess we are.
So you're asking people who want to kill. So here's me looking at a group of people and they say, that person raped and murdered a child, they should die. And I say, no. We don't trust the state.
I'm glad you say that, but
I don't like that person. I think what they did is evil beyond belief. And if we were to
let's unleash them on the world.
Let's throw them to other countries?
Yeah. Well, to other countries. My point is,
wait, do you want to release child rapists into Cuba?
So the argument would be that presupposition is that you trust the government
these people?
explicitly and implicitly. Do you?
I don't trust the government.
So if Donald Trump came to you and said Mahmoud Khalil is a rapist and a child murderer, would you say, okay, Trump, you're right?
I'd say prove it.
Exactly.
Prove it. Yeah.
And now what if he said, we have circumstantial evidence that I believe proves it beyond a reasonable doubt, but nothing definitive, no video, but enough to where a jury of Americans say, we believe it, he should be killed.
Wait, no, proof beyond a reasonable doubt we have?
Yes.
Then put it in front of a jury and it'll be a conviction.
Okay, so my point is, I don't believe the state should be able to murder people.
Okay.
There are, with certain exceptions. That is, a police officer literally watching someone about to rape and murder a child uses force to stop.
That's self-defense and that's imminent
The issue I take largely is, in many circumstances, we see that, I don't want to get into a death penalty debate here.
But why do you want to send child rapists to other countries?
Because they're not child rapists. The issue is...
That's the example you gave.
Because I'm trying to choose the most evil thing imaginable. But what you're putting there is, you trust the government implicitly when they choose...
I don't, but I also don't want to send child rapists to fucking Cuba.
Neither do I.
So then why do you want to send exile, a bunch of fucking hardened criminals to other countries?
Because you're assuming they're hardened criminals, and that's not my point. Oh. And I'm not saying other countries. I mean, what country would...
Where would you exile them? Fucking Antarctica?
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Are you for the death penalty?
No.
So you would ask other people to pay the bill for child rapists?
Yes.
And what if they say we refuse to do that, we're going to kill them?
I would say you can't.
What if they outvote you and they do it anyway?
I guess they would outvote me and they would kill him.
I feel like the issue I take is not, of course, in defense of evil. It is obviously if someone is about to engage in an act of great bodily harm or death against another person, we actually reserve universally the right to stop that person. Well, actually, I would say
that's way different than the courts are not here to stop somebody necessarily from like doing a bad thing. It's there to like that could be like a side effect, like what's the word I'm looking for? Deterrence, right? Could be a side effect, but the goal for courts is to punish somebody for an action they've already done, generally, right?
The left largely doesn't. But a lot of people on the left, the liberals, and almost all of conservatives do agree. If someone's about to engage in great bodily harm, you have the right to...
self-defense, but we're talking about someone who's been duly convicted, whether it's murder of a child, rape of a child. I don't want to throw them in... I want to exile them and make it so they're free. Put them in a... But then that's like the death penalty. Do they not have any food there? Or like, do they have servants there? I guess
none.
So you're killing them by banishing them to a place where there's no...
Maybe.
Okay, you're in favor of death penalty, just favor death penalty by starvation and exposure.
Maybe.
No, you're not. You're not.
No. I'm saying maybe they'll die. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, but should we be... Okay, so maybe they'll die.
I can't believe I got the liberal arguing for the death penalty.
No, wait. I'm against both exile. I'm against both exile, and I'm against a U.S. citizen, and I'm against...
Well, fair point. I'll concede you this. Exile is much more difficult in today's age because there's national boundaries everywhere.
Yeah.
But my argument would be penal colony is preferable to...
death penalty? So perhaps you're paying for it anyway, right?
We'll put it this way. Perhaps we actually would agree largely that we want life imprisonment. We just disagree on the extent of how we actually implement it.
Should it be in America, or should it be in a penal colony in some horrible place? But then it's just...
Maybe it's not a horrible place. Maybe it's just you don't get the luxuries of society. I'm not saying this. But I got to be honest, like an island with a 20-mile circumference...
It's a good drink, bro.
The spinach are good.
Yeah.
I don't trust the government, and I don't like the idea that innocent people are killed. And there is a high percentage, I think it's over 1%, of death penalty cases end up being innocent people.
What if it's an innocent person exiled to Antarctica to die?
And that's horrifying.
And I appreciate that about you, and I respect that. I want to move to one issue then. If you care about due process and you care about the innocent being faced with consequences they don't deserve, can't you condemn the Alien Enemies Act deportations, where these guys, they're not even given a hearing. They're just being thrown into a slave colony in El Salvador. How can you say that you're okay? You want to make sure that we have this robust process where some of these people are claiming they're trying to flee Trinidad. That's bad.
So the issue I see largely is you and I completely disagree as to the constitutionality of the arrest of John Ellis.
Okay.
Oh my
is that
God.
irreconcilable on every single issue? Can't we have ground on this?
This is the easiest and one example I can cite, though there are many others, in which I feel the establishment state, which includes neocons, although the neocons have now joined the Democratic Party, have waged war on the American people for the purpose of power. They are violating the Constitution. They do it every single day. Donald Trump is responding with commensurate force against forces that were enacted against him and his movement.
Against some people who could be innocent.
So my point is this. First of all, they're all illegal immigrants.
We don't know that. Do you know that?
There has been no argument presented and all information released by the administration as to those he deported.
We don't have a full accounting of everyone on there. The government admitted in its oral argument.
And I agree with you on that. Yeah. And I've since it started agreed, Trump needs to release a list of every person he's deporting to prove to the public these are non-citizens.
But even illegal immigrants under the INA have rights even to expedited removal procedures. One thing that Trump is doing that Joe Biden didn't do is he extended expedited removal to its maximal scope.
Agreed. But here's my point. Joe Biden created, and so did Obama, paths to legality in the United States that some would argue are extra legal, notably DACA. So that's not congressionally approved action. That was an executive order.
True.
So the view on the right would be, during the Obama administration and during the Biden administration, they created special provisions that seemingly violate the moral foundation of this country and our laws to bring in as many immigrants as possible. Claiming that everybody who came here was an asylee is an affront to reality in that many of these people, some of them came from Africa. Certainly you can want to flee Africa, but Brazil is awesome. And Mexico is awesome.
But asylee status is based on whether you're persecuted. And you can be persecuted in Brazil, you can be persecuted in Africa.
Exactly. But if you're from Africa and you come to Brazil where you're no longer persecuted, and then you have to go through every single country, and none of those countries do you stop. Or more importantly, when the caravans were passing through Mexico, and Mexico offered all of them asylum, and they all said no, that is an affront to the goodwill of the American people.
It's also it's not compliant with asylee law, where you have to stop at the first safe harbor states, and so they no longer are asylee when they get here.
But my point is that you asked me about Donald Trump's deportation of Trinidad and
alleged.
My argument is we need transparency on the issue. So long as the Trump administration does that's my biggest criticism. My criticism of Mahmoud Khalil and the other protesters is saying they align with Hamas for having opinions that are critical of Israel is ridiculous. Just because you don't like what Israel's doing doesn't mean you support Hamas. That being said, if he did support Hamas, you can argue that. But still.
Wait, so if he didn't support Hamas, you would be against his deportation?
Clarify. What do you mean?
So if he didn't support Hamas, and by your lights, he just supported...
I don't know that he supported Hamas.
No, right. So assume that he didn't support Hamas under your lights, whatever that is.
I'm in favor of deportation because what I'm saying of Donald Trump is he's using commensurate force in deportation that Biden and Obama used for importation.
No, this is green card holder. So green card holder, where you said there's a difference between Hamas support and Palestinian support. So in the situation in which
deport him.
He's not a legal green card holder.
Let me say it one more time. Obama and Biden used special provisions, executive order, and outright violations of the law to bring in millions of people And Donald Trump isn't even going that far in the deportations. There are questions and criticisms of the Tren de Aragua deportations. There's judges' hearings over these things. I will say right now, I demand transparency from the Trump administration. I do not accept a blanket, trust us, we just did it.
But they're in court saying we don't even need to tell the court. They're saying we don't even need to say.
Right, but they wouldn't need to tell an Administrative Procedure Act. Are you talking about in the Alien Enemies?
No, well, that's an APA claim. The one in the DC Circuit system. They're saying in court we don't have to even tell you when the flights took off, even though they're parading, they're tweeting. Marco Rubio is retweeting this. Oops.
And so let's just call that commensurate.
So what's good for the goose, good for the gander?
No, it's all bad. It's all bad.
No, it's not good for the goose, good for the gander. It's remedying the problem that they illegally made. That's the point Tim is making.
People could be innocent.
Indeed. And the problem is Obama and Biden's fault.
This argument, I don't even know what we're talking about right now. This is wacky, weird shit. So because you think that Biden and Obama brought in people illegally, now we can just deport whoever the fuck to make up for it? This is the dumbest. This is just what. Okay. If that was your position, you should have said at the very beginning, and then we wouldn't have to waste the time on all these boring legal arguments. You say, oh, we don't give a fuck what they do, whether it's legal or not, because it's revenge for what Biden and Obama did. It's okay. Also, I don't know why we're bringing Obama in here when Obama deported a fuck ton of people, but okay.
We are in a conflict situation with seemingly no resolution that will satisfy anybody.
Why don't you pass a law then? Republicans control Congress.
I agree.
if you want to rescind asylee status or say that we have no procedures or whatever, pass a law. It's very clear under established Supreme Court precedent they have no right to be here.
I said the same thing to what Obama and Biden did. Why instead of opening the southern border and saying just claim you're an asylum seeker, we'll let it go. You know what I got a problem with? Donald Trump deporting alleged Tren de Aragua. I am still sitting here being like, I want transparency on this issue, and I will tell them to their faces when I see them, and I will say it, give the public a list and prove it, because we want to believe you're doing something that's right, but as long as you pretend it's going to be in secret and you refuse to tell us who's actually being deported, we have problems here. They've released partial lists, you're correct. But when the news report comes out about a barber or this runner being deported because of criminals, do not care. Do not exploit the goodwill of this country. Do not lie to our faces that you need asylum when you're coming here for economic status. But more importantly, I would prefer it didn't happen. I don't want to see a gay barber in El Salvador.
He might have been persecuted. Gay people are persecuted.
Indeed, and he could have stayed in Mexico. Mexico's awesome.
Yeah, but that's a substantive claim, because there could be reasons why it doesn't count as a safe country under the law. But even if it does, and because that would be an argument that says his asylum claim is a loser.
I don't care.
Even if his asylum claim is a loser, doesn't he have a right under your very same framework that says that you want to protect people who are improperly accused, you want to protect even people who do child rape from the death penalty?
No.
From the death penalty.
No. You are absolutely misunderstanding.
No, from the death penalty. Sorry.
The death penalty is that evil people get what's coming to them, but the state can be included among evil people. It's not that I want to protect those people. It's that I'm concerned the innocent will die because the state wants innocent people to die.
Right, and in order to protect the innocent, you're protecting bad people. Right.
As Benjamin Franklin and Blackstone said, it's better that the guilty go free than the innocent suffer.
Well, there you go.
So you are not innocent when you illegally enter this country.
But this guy's not alleged to have illegally entered the country.
Yes, he is.
He's alleged to have presented himself at a border for inspection and admission.
No, or Pisco is, Tim is going to say every single, remember, we said this yesterday, to a conservative, they'll play games around who's allowed in or visa or asylum or whatever, but conservatives truly don't believe in the asylum process. Conservatives don't believe anybody should be in this country from asylum seeking. They're all illegal. Every asylum seeker is an illegal immigrant. That's what Tim is getting at.
Claimed asylum. That's
exploitation.
What do you mean exploitation?
Joe Biden opened the border to tens of millions of people and just said, asylees. We know they're not.
He opened the border. Okay,
indeed. Well, you take a look at these two administrations, how different they are. Yeah. Within a month of Trump getting in, border crossings dropped to a few thousand. They've got MRAPs and tanks now patrolling the border. No one's coming across anymore. What happened to all the asylum seekers? They don't need asylum anymore now that Trump's saying you got to go through the port legally. They're not going to the border in Mexicali and Mexico and saying, I'm an asylum seeker. They just stopped coming.
You're alleging that Joe Biden did not enforce immigration law. He was the fact. He's deporting more people than Trump is.
He deported a lot of people, but here's a fact. CBP, as reported on The View of all places, children were coming across the border with numbers on their arms to be sold into sex slavery. And the CBP under Biden were instructed to facilitate that. And there were people driving vans who knew what's happening. You got a problem with it? Take it up with The View and Dr. Phil. They're the ones who reported it.
Yeah, so first of all, Dr. Phil's a fucking, I have people
in my life.
I have people in my life. I have people in my life who like Dr. Phil's content. So I'll save the aspersion. Listen, there's big differences in immigration policy, no doubt. But something I would hope that we would have agreement on, regardless of how bad you think. Let's even assume Joe Biden opened the doors to illegal immigration. Things should be done the right way, not the wrong way. If you want to have summary removals, then pass a law that allows for that. Or right, because you took issue with DACA, right? You took issue with DACA.
Indeed.
So shouldn't you be consistent and say, well, I don't support excesses of executive power when it's done in favor of immigration or against it? Be consistent.
The issue is, and the point I'm bringing up, the reason why Trump is doing the things he's doing, and the difficult moral position I find myself in, is Biden did many things which were destructive to this country, and Trump is reversing those things. Biden did a whole, so you know what it is? Imagine it this way. There's a great tower that every administration puts blocks on top of. It is growing greater every single time. We add laws, we add executive orders, we rarely rescind them. The more that gets added to it, the greater the instability begins to wobble far to the right, then far to the left, and eventually the whole thing goes crumbling down. How do we deal with a mass influx of I'm going to use the low number, 10 million non-citizens? Donald Trump says, first,
over a year? You think it's over
4 years?
Okay.
Some estimate 20.
Well, a lot of these are
the lowest.
A lot of these are recatches, and they're not. We don't think that 10 million over 4 years actually.
No. Some people estimate 20 million.
You think 20 million?
I don't. I'm using the low estimate of 10 million. So the ranges are 10 to 20 million.
Here we're calculating estimated border crossings aren't necessarily coextensive with individuals who are coming and staying here permanently.
Indeed, it could be more because apprehensions and interactions don't mean some people got through. So we're dealing with the ramifications of this both in the census, which means congressionally, in the Electoral College, how it structures our government, how we deal with...
Republicans are doing great on that. On the front of the census, Republicans are doing fantastic. In the next census, it's not going to be enough if Kamala wins Michigan, Wisconsin. So they're doing fine. So it's not a big threat to the allocation, the representation.
It certainly is. Saying that Republicans may win does not change the fact that California is an extra vote for the president through non-citizenship.
But Texas has a shit ton of...
Indeed. No, none of it. Nobody should have that. I don't care if you're Republican or
It's
Democrat.
not really distorting our democracy in that way based on...
It is.
How can you say that you don't know, right? Is it really the case that Democrat states have more illegal immigrants than Republican?
They're called sanctuary states and they don't enforce...
I thought the argument was always that Republicans are bearing a bigger brunt. Republican states have to, the border states, Texas,
California has
Florida.
more illegal immigrants than other states. Blue states are sanctuary states that don't enforce immigration law, and that's why Greg Abbott was sending them there, and that's why I said it was a stupid thing to do. Because what it does,
was a brilliant thing to do. You think it was stupid?
Absolutely. It was funny in a lot of sense. Like the Martha's Vineyard thing was funny. If these people want to be a sanctuary, then we will transport them and they can provide aid and assistance. The problem is, as I've said, all this does is bolster their numbers in the census and give them extra votes for president. All of these things are issues. We have gone over and we do have to go because I got to give a shout out to Jeremy Hambley because we're going to be rating Jeremy Hambley's show right now. But what my point ultimately is, I think I made it a million times. Donald Trump is going to do things that are seemingly drastic. The left will be angry about. But the left did similarly drastic things. So what we're getting is two sides arguing God is on my side effectively. I mean, figuratively, not literally. The left says we are morally right in how we've done this. You are morally wrong for how you do it. The right is saying the inverse. The question is who will muster up the political might to actually succeed? Abraham Lincoln arrested the Maryland legislature, large portions of it, for being sympathetic to the Confederates. He suspended habeas corpus. No one calls him a dictator except for the Confederates. Today, it's a difficult question. It is.
I think he was a tyrant.
And
Abraham Lincoln was one of the worst presidents we ever had. He ended up being in the perfect place to do a necessary thing, which was ultimately free the slaves.
So if Trump violates a court order,
he was a tyrant in the way.
So if Trump violates a court order, like Lincoln is alleged to have.
No. Not every court order is a legal court order.
If he violates
every court order,
if he violates a court order,
like imagine that. Like Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant, but Donald Trump hasn't done anything wrong. Like it's just like this is just like deeply unserious. So fucking stupid.
It's not commitments because I think if we're being consistent, if you're calling him a tyrant,
not every court order is a legal
if he violates a court order from a federal appellate court,
not every court order from a federal
Only
appellate
Supreme
court. No, even a Supreme Court could in theory issue an illegal order. That's right.
As per, like this is a layman's argument. Like this is somebody who doesn't know anything about law arguing this. A Supreme Court could issue an order that's illegal. Illegal as per who? Who determines that? Like what do you even? Do you understand what you're saying when you even say that? I don't understand what. Please ask him that. Who determines if it's illegal or not?
Even the Supreme Court, because if in fact the Constitution says that they don't have a certain right to something, and a federal judge, district court judge, completely disregards what's written in the statute, would you agree with me that this black letter statute which says something, and a federal judge disregards that, and he issues an order in complete opposition to what is expressly written word for word? Would you agree that's an illegal order?
I agree with Marbury v. Madison, which it's emphatically the providence and duty of the Judicial Department to say
it has to be a reasonable interpretation of an ambiguous
according
term.
to Trump.
So
yes, thank you. According to who? Reasonable interpretation according to who? What are you saying here? It's up to the executive to determine if the judiciary has given a reasonable interpretation?
I'm not saying to overturn. Marbury v. Madison just gives the power to the court to overturn the statute. They're not overturning the statute. If they read a statute as the inverse.
That Marbury v. Madison is not just where is this? Why? I don't understand where these conservatives have like reinterpreted every single like bedrock foundational principle in this country recently. It's so weird. Marbury v. Madison just says that the providence of the courts is to determine what is the law, like not just to overturn a statute. What the fuck does that even mean? Congress can overturn a statute by passing a new law. What do you?
So what the written words of the statute means, and the district court judge were to do that. It's like, I'm going to do this. I don't care that it says this. I don't care what the statute says. I'm going to write this. That would be an illegal order. If that illegal order got affirmed at the circuit level, that would still be an illegal order.
If the Supreme Court orders Trump,
if the Supreme Court in fact did it, that still would be an illegal order.
And so you're telling us right now that if the Supreme Court orders Trump to do something, and he defies it, you're not going to commit to condemning that action if him defy.
Correct. He's not. See, that's a good layout, right? This is what I'm saying, right? That no action will ever be condemned by Donald Trump. Because look, Good Logic just laid out his brain poisoning right here. He just laid out the cult programming, right? Well, because what he might say is Trump should follow the courts, but only insofar as the courts are issuing things that are legally coherent. And then if the court issues something that Trump doesn't like, then people like Good Logic will say, oh, well, it wasn't a legally coherent order. That was an unlawful thing by the courts, as determined by Donald Trump. It's
him define the Supreme Court.
Oh, on a political level, as far as a legal level, you ask me in any given hypothetical. What I will tell you is this. I'll tell you this. As far as on a political level, I think that it's probably very foolish for him to disregard that. I think that.
Would you condemn him?
Would I condemn him? Yeah, you can't give me a hypothetical order.
Okay,
I can't do that.
You can't consider a hypothetical. Like, and also like this, I've never heard anybody be as bad. I think as, no, I have. It's Good Logic here where he's like, he just refuses. I can't consider a hypothetical where a president is defying an order from the court. That's just like.
It really depends on the scenario. There are many scenarios where I could see condemning Trump. I have condemned him in certain scenarios where I thought what he's doing was politically wrong or was
politically wrong.
was unethical or illegal. I don't have a problem condemning him. I think that he happens to have phenomenal work as our president. He is exceptional president.
That's not what we're talking about.
You can try and label him whatever you want. He is the most efficient president, which in the first 100 days of this presidency, we're only 75 days in, and he's been exceptional. But I still can condemn him if he makes a mistake. The same way I made a joke about Lindsey Graham, I'll condemn him if he does something wrong. That's
I just want to say, because you called Trump a degenerate. When you look at Donald Trump, he's had multiple wives. He's had different children from different wives.
Not for that. The personal stuff is whatever. But it's for his violence on the Constitution, the rule of law, and authoritarianism. That's why he's.
Oh, okay. I mean, I feel like
Ken's going to say he either won't address it because he doesn't want to get into it, or he'll say, well, all the presidents do this. Everybody does this. Both sides do it.
Bit of a stretch to use the word degenerate. I don't mind if you want to criticize him for your view on that.
Degenerating the Constitution and the rule of law in the country.
I was going to say, like, if
absolutely not. This constitutional crisis we have right now is 100% the exclusive fault of the judiciary. When the judiciary steps out of its bounds and says, "Hey, I'm going to start implementing national policy on this thing over here because you know what? I'm some judge from Rhode Island, and there's a national order, there's a universal order which is affecting the entire country, and even though it's really only affecting
what is a federal district? What is jurisdiction? It's all these are just like the most ridiculously most insane whatever.
I don't know, 1% of the national population here in my domain, I'm going to be impacting this executive order that's nationwide throughout the country. If you think that is something that should be empowered to district court judges, and that's something that's completely legal, what has Trump done? Has he said, you know what, you wrote your stupid decision, you go enforce it?
Essentially, yes.
No, he has no. Instead of doing that, he very artfully gave deference to the court by saying, you know what, I'm going to not tell you how stupid you are, how illegal your order is, and how ridiculous and asinine you are that you think that you're the president of the United States and there's 3,700 other district judges who are all present and have executive power. He doesn't do that. Instead, he very artfully avoids a constitutional crisis by saying, you know what, I'm going to pretend that this court order has deference and find some way that my actions are not going to be impeded by any stupid judge who happened to get assigned, and at the same time, not...
Pisco should just ask him at the end here, just to listen to him squirm. Oh, so would you say the same thing about when Joe Biden tried to cancel student loan debt? I wonder what Good Logic had to say about that.
Not embarrass the court by saying I'm disregarding the order. That is something he should be applauded for over and over again because he has saved us from a constitutional crisis that these judges are trying to
Unbelievable.
We've definitely gone over.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But no, it's absolutely fantastic. This has been wonderful. You guys are great. I really do appreciate it. I think time flew, and I'd love to keep going. So, my final thoughts as sort of the, although people don't really call me a fence sitter at this point in my career, I'd simply say, for me, what I just end up hearing is, in this instance, we were right to rule the way we did. And I would only say that when I get asked this question over and over again about what should Trump do or why should he do it, my response is, any leader should enforce a moral and just society. Everybody actually agrees with it. The difference is everybody's view of what moral and justice is dramatically different. So there are large factions of a moral worldview. There's two principal ones. They're fighting for what they want, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to get it. I don't know what that turns into, but that's where we're at. So I don't know if you want to give a final thought and shout something out before we wrap.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks so much for having me on. Thank you, Joe. It's always fun when we get into it, and we certainly did. I think we covered some topics, and so I really appreciate being on. Pisco's Hour on YouTube and Piscolity on Twitter. Super appreciate it, and again, always love the debates and discussions.
Absolutely, it's fantastic.
And I'm Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. I urge everyone to check out my podcast, which actually starts nightly right after Timcast finishes his. I need him to start feeding them over to me like Hamlet. So, but and if you enjoy this conversation, I cover law, I cover politics, I try and make it enjoyable while at the same time, really looking at things from a philosophical perspectives to right and wrong. So that's Good Logic, LAWGIC, and on Twitter, I'm at The Following Pro. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to both of you.
Yeah, this is wonderful. For everybody else, go check out Jeremy Hambley. He's live now, rumble.com. We got the link in the chat. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all tonight at 8 p.m. at Timcast IRL.
Jesus.